Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jessica Dishon. Jessica Dishon was born on May 2, 1982, in the small town of Shepherdsville, Kentucky. As the eldest of 3 children, Jessica took on significant responsibilities from a young age, helping her parents care for her 2 younger brothers while they worked. At age 15, Jessica started working part-time at a restaurant to save money to buy her first car, a red Pontiac. A few years later, she bought the car she wanted. Despite her job, Jessica excelled in school and began planning to attend college, where she hoped to study accounting. In the fall of 1999, 17-year-old Jessica was about to start her senior year of high school. She had also started dating a boy, which made her very happy. On the morning of Friday, September 10th, Jessica's parents went to work, and her younger brothers caught the bus to school. However, Jessica did not leave for school as planned. Later that day, around noon, Jessica's mother returned home from work and noticed something unusual. Jessica's car was still parked in front of the house. The mother went to Jessica's room, thinking that maybe she had overslept and missed school. But Jessica was not in her bedroom. The mother then considered the possibility that Jessica might have gotten a ride to school from her father, so she called him to ask. However, he told her that he had gone to work alone that morning. Jessica's mother suspected something was wrong with her car, so she took out a spare key to try to start the car. When she approached the car, the driver's door was slightly open, and Jessica's cell phone was lying on the seat with the numbers 9 and 1 displayed on the screen, indicating that she had tried to call 911. Jessica's shoes and keys were found under the front seat, while her textbooks, work clothes, and purse were in the back seat. Jessica's mother was worried about Jessica's safety. It was obvious that she had tried to call for help but was unsuccessful. Furthermore, Jessica could not leave her belongings in the car and leave. Jessica's parents contacted her school, learning that Jessica had not come to class that day. When Jessica's best friend at work called her parents a few hours later, saying that Jessica had not come to work, they became even more worried about Jessica. Jessica's parents immediately contacted the police, but the sheriff downplayed the situation, suggesting that Jessica might have wandered off and would return home on her own. Despite Jessica's parents' pleas, the sheriff refused to open an investigation. Undeterred, Jessica's parents contacted relatives, friends, and acquaintances, but no one had any information about Jessica's whereabouts. They then searched the entire town, scouring the area, but there was no sign of her. The next morning, Jessica's parents returned to the sheriff's office to report that she had not returned home. The sheriff sent 2 officers to check Jessica's car. However, the officers searched the car without wearing gloves, potentially destroying evidence. Furthermore, the officers did not search Jessica's room. Feeling frustrated with the police, Jessica's parents sought the help of the local media, hoping to draw attention to Jessica's disappearance and the police's lack of attention. Jessica's family and friends, led by her father and Uncle Stanley, launched a search for Jessica. They also distributed flyers with information about Jessica. Fearing the worst, they focused their search on an area near a river, which was known to be a crime hub. For hours, Jessica's family members thoroughly searched the challenging terrain near the river but couldn't find any sign of Jessica. The next morning, Jessica's parents were at home, and their son was playing in the yard. Suddenly, he rushed inside, saying he had heard a faint cry for help that sounded exactly like his sister's voice. Jessica's father immediately grabbed his gun and ran outside to find the source of the screams. At the same time, his brother arrived and joined the search. They quickly noticed smoke coming from the property of their neighbor, 40-year-old David Brooks. As they approached, they saw Brooks undressing on his property. Jessica's father asked Brooks for permission to search his farm, but Brooks refused and told them to leave. This was not the only unusual behavior Brooks displayed. Before Jessica's disappearance, the two families had a normal relationship. However, soon after, he would drive slowly past their house, staring at them with an ominous smile. After seeing Brooks burning clothes on their property, Jessica's parents went back to the police, shared their concerns and asked them to come and meet Brooks with the dogs. The police agreed. The dogs were given some of Jessica's clothes to track her scent. They led the police to Brooks's fire pit, but no significant evidence was found. However, the dogs did find black gloves in one of Brooks's sheds that smelled like decomposition. During the search, no concrete evidence was found. Frustrated with the police, Jessica's father contacted the FBI for help. The FBI usually does not get involved in missing persons cases based on the family's request, but this time they decided to investigate immediately. After Jessica's parents presented the case and the family's findings, the FBI opened a full-scale investigation. The FBI proceeded to collect fingerprints from Jessica's room and her car, confiscating all potential evidence for further analysis. Additionally, investigators conducted a comprehensive search of the area using helicopters and volunteers. They thoroughly examined the pond near Jessica's home. The FBI searched Brooks' farm and found a printed photo of Jessica. This discovery led the FBI to strongly suspect Brooks' involvement in her disappearance. They also suspected his 35-year-old brother, Joseph, although despite a thorough search, the FBI found no evidence. Due to lack of incriminating evidence, the investigation focused on searching the surrounding area. 17 days after Jessica went missing, police received a call on September 27th. A woman was driving along a road near the river. Noticing something unusual near a tree, the woman stopped to check and was horrified to see a body. She called the police immediately. When FBI agents arrived, they discovered the body of a young woman who had suffered severe trauma. She was missing several fingers and toes. A rope tied around her leg showed traces of red and silver paint. Additionally, some of her clothing was missing, suggesting that she may have been sexually assaulted, leading the FBI to develop disturbing theories about the murder. Medical experts later confirmed the identity and determined that Jessica had been strangled. Her body also showed extensive bruising. Her limbs and fingers had been separated after death, suggesting that she was still alive when this happened. However, the most disturbing fact was that Jessica had survived for approximately 3 days after she went missing. This meant that the police had the opportunity to rescue her. But unfortunately, they did not take any action to do so. After the body was discovered, the FBI re-interviewed Brooks, who changed his story. He initially said he had seen Jessica near her home, but later said he had not seen her. His alibi was disputed by his wife, and he failed a polygraph test, prompting the FBI to arrest him and proceed to trial. The FBI said the likelihood of a conviction was low due to a lack of concrete evidence. While they had some troubling clues that pointed to his involvement, they were circumstantial and inconclusive. As the trial progressed, detectives continued to search for additional evidence. During a re-examination of Brooks' car, they found a rope similar to the one used to tie Jessica up. However, analysis showed no DNA on the rope. Brooks' trial began in January 2003. His attorney maintained his innocence, citing a lack of evidence. During the trial, it was revealed that investigators had found the victim's missing limbs but had not properly preserved them, causing them to decompose and lose potential evidence. The remaining circumstantial evidence was insufficient to convict, and the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision, resulting in Brooks' acquittal. Under state law, he could only be brought back if new evidence was discovered. Jessica's parents were devastated by the outcome. The parents also felt that if the police had done their job properly, Jessica might still be alive. Over time, the case went cold and was largely abandoned, leaving the family without closure. In 2012, a new detective, Lynn Hunt, joined the local police department and was tasked with reviewing unsolved cases. Lynn Hunt began by examining the murder case of Jessica. However, she was shocked to find that the original investigation was poorly handled, with case files containing errors and lacking key information from interviews with relevant parties. The evidence was also not properly documented, forcing Lynn Hunt to start the investigation from scratch 13 years after the crime. Hunt met with Jessica's family and obtained a box of her belongings that had been kept in her car at the time of the murder. One of her brothers, now an adult, had kept the box since the police returned the items to the family. Lynn Hunt was again disappointed by the careless handling of the evidence, as it had not been stored according to protocol. Her efforts paid off when she discovered a crucial document, Brooks' medical examination report, which revealed that Brooks had an IQ of 61, which is considered low. With a low IQ, Brooks may not have fully understood the questions and may have given incomplete answers. All of this led Lynn Hunt to think that this man might not have anything to do with the case. Lynn Hunt began to consider other suspects. Lynn Hunt conducted an extensive review of everyone connected to the case and those living in the surrounding area. This investigation continued until September 2014, nearly 15 years after Jessica's death. A coworker contacted Lynn Hunt with information about an inmate at the Kentucky State Prison who claimed to know who killed Jessica. Lynn Hunt initially dismissed the information as unreliable. Many inmates make up stories to get released early. However, Lynn Hunt verified the information before dismissing it. Lynn Hunt visited the prison and met a man who told her that he had previously shared a cell with another inmate. During conversations, the inmate revealed to him that he was responsible for the murder of Jessica Dishon. The informant revealed that Stanley Dishon, Jessica Dishon's uncle, had a dark secret. According to the informant, Stanley confessed to years of sexual abuse of Jessica while they lived under the same roof. He warned her that if she spoke about the abuse, he would kill her or someone she cared about. When Jessica started dating in the spring of 1999, Stanley became increasingly fearful that she might confide in her boyfriend about the abuse she had suffered at his hands. On September 10th, Stanley visited Jessica at her home when she was alone, and he saw her packing her belongings into her car. He approached her and asked her to end her relationship with her boyfriend. However, Jessica refused, threatening to expose Stanley's actions if he did not leave her alone. As Stanley threatened her, causing Jessica to reach for the phone to call 911. Stanley tried to grab her, but she broke free and ran back to her room. Stanley followed her into her room, striking her before binding her with her own sheets. Stanley then dragged her to an abandoned shed not far from where her body would later be discovered. Stanley held Jessica captive for several days, subjecting her to abuse and torture before ultimately killing her. Stanley then placed her body in a visible location near the road and buried the bloody sheets under the shed. Additionally, Stanley removed some of Jessica's limbs in an attempt to mislead the police, making it seem like the murder was the work of drug traffickers. Lynn Hunt was intrigued to discover that this crucial detail about the missing limbs had never been made public. Only Jessica's closest relatives were aware that her body had been mutilated, which meant the informant couldn't have fabricated this information. Furthermore, Stanley claimed to have buried Jessica's shoe under a broken tree near the shed. Determined to verify the informant's story, Lynn Hunt decided to search for buried evidence. With limited resources at the local police department, she enlisted the help of Jessica's brother and other relatives, keeping Stanley's possible guilt a secret. She did not report her suspected evidence to them. On the first day of the search, no clues were found despite searching the areas described by the informant. The next day, Jessica's brother and Lynn Hunt returned to the scene. On the way, they noticed an abandoned barn on the side of the road and decided to search. Inside the barn, they began digging. Their search uncovered a buried bed sheet. Lynn Hunt collected the evidence and rushed to Jessica's home. Since her disappearance, her parents had left her room unchanged, which helped in verifying the evidence. Upon comparison, Lynn Hunt confirmed that the bed sheet was indeed from Jessica's bedding, as it matched the pattern of the other linens and was missing from her bed. Following this discovery, Stanley was arrested and questioned by police. Although he appeared visibly shaken during questioning, he refused to confess to the crime. Stanley was eventually charged with murder and the case went to trial. This news shocked Jessica's father. The murderer he had been searching for was none other than his own brother Stanley Dishon. As the trial progressed, Lynn Hunt dug into Stanley's past to gather more evidence. She knew that he had assaulted Jessica, but her investigation uncovered that several of Stanley's female relatives had come forward to report that he had sexually abused them as children. Stanley would approach his relatives, claiming he was temporarily homeless, and asked to stay at their home. However, when left alone with the young girls in their homes, Stanley would sexually assault them, threatening them to ensure their silence. Based on multiple similar accounts, police deduced that Stanley had been engaging in this behavior for approximately 3 decades. Lynn Hunt knew full well that a conviction for murder would be difficult, given the lack of direct evidence, such as fingerprints or DNA, linking Stanley to the crime. Undeterred, Lynn Hunt continued her investigation and stumbled upon a box of old case files that had not been examined before. As she sifted through the boxes, Lynn Hunt was once again frustrated with the police who had originally handled the case. She noticed a letter dated June 26, 2002. A concerned person had written to the police at the time, recounting a story identical to one Lynn Hunt later heard from an inmate at the Kentucky Penitentiary. In the summer of 2002, Stanley was serving a sentence for assaulting a minor family member. While in prison, he confided in a fellow inmate about killing his niece, Jessica. Unbeknownst to Stanley, his fellow inmate was a police informant who soon wrote a detailed letter to the police investigating the case, exposing the horrific events surrounding Jessica's death. However, police believed Brooks was the prime suspect at the time, causing them to ignore other potential leads. This inaction left Lynn Hunt deeply frustrated, becoming frustrated with the lack of professionalism of his colleagues. If the police had done their job properly, this case could have been solved in 2002. After all these years, Lynn Hunt could only hope that Stanley would finally face justice for his actions at the upcoming trial. The process began in 2015 when Stanley appeared in court, pleading not guilty. Jessica's parents were furious. The prosecution believed that a guilty verdict on the murder charges would be difficult due to a lack of evidence. There were also assault charges against other female family members. The prosecution would need these family members to testify in court, sharing explicit details about Stanley's actions against them. Given these challenges, the prosecution decided to offer Stanley a plea deal. In exchange for dropping the death penalty, Stanley would have to plead guilty to both the assaults on his relatives and Jessica's murder. Ultimately, Stanley accepted the deal and pleaded guilty. Jessica's parents, who wanted the truth, were unhappy with this arrangement, but Stanley remained silent in accordance with the terms of the plea deal. Stanley was sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Since he was 56 years old at the time of his conviction, he could be released at age 71. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Smith family. George Smith was born and raised in Greenwich, Connecticut. He came from a close-knit, caring family, an environment that nurtured his intelligence. His father, George Smith Sr., owned the liquor store in the town, which was not just a job, but a passion that brought him joy. George Smith pursued higher education in business at Babson College in Massachusetts and graduated in 2000. After completing his studies, he worked in Boston as a data mining analyst for several years. However, he realized that his true passion was helping his family in the business. In 2005, George made the conscious decision to return home to learn the basics of business from his family's store. His goal was to one day take over the business, allowing his parents to retire and enjoy the fruits of their labor. In 2002, at a reunion with old friends, George Smith met Jennifer. She, a Connecticut native who had just found work as an elementary school teacher, would later become his life partner. George was immediately attracted to her beautiful appearance, open personality, and strong ambition, and they quickly fell deeply in love. George's parents also welcomed Jennifer with open arms. 3 years later, in 2005, when George was 26, they decided to tie the knot and start a new life together. Their picturesque wedding ceremony was held right on the beach at the Castle Hill Inn, Newport, Rhode Island. Nai sao bui lu, cap doi moi koi de tan hong tuan trang mat xa hoa kio de 12 gay tren du Thuyen Royal Caribbean. Their journey began in Barcelona on June 29, with stops in France's Côte d'Azur and along Italy's coast. On board, George and Jennifer befriended another couple and a young man named Josh Skin from California. Josh Skin, a 20 years old with a great sense of humor, quickly became friends with George. The group had a great time together. On July 1st, when the ship docked off the Italian coast, they decided to spend the day on land. July 4th, they explored the island, wandering through the narrow streets of the old town, swimming in the crystal-clear Aegean Sea, and sampling local cuisine in quaint taverns. They were carefree and happy, enjoying each other's company and the island's beauty. The group left Mykonos with unforgettable memories and planned to continue the fun on the ship's deck that evening. After a romantic dinner, George and Jennifer rejoined their friends on the ship. The group decided to get together and enjoy a good time together, laugh and create memories of their vacation. The evening was filled with laughter and excitement. After enjoying appetizers and drinks, the newlyweds, accompanied by Josh Skin, headed to the ship Ciaschino to continue the fun. George and Josh Skin spent their evening enjoying a game of craps, while Jennifer had fun playing poker at a nearby table. As the night came to a close, the newlyweds had lost a substantial amount of money, but they joked about it lightheartedly, unbothered by their losses. After the Ciaschino closed, they decided to keep the party going. Later, around 2:30 a.m. on June 5, 2005, security cameras on the Greek island of Mykonos caught footage of George leaving the Ciaschino, but it remains unclear whether he returned to his cabin afterwards. George Smith, a 26-year-old newlywed, is on his honeymoon with his wife Jennifer. They is having a fantastic time together, soaking up the lively atmosphere and entertainment on board. However, their enjoyable evening suddenly takes a mysterious turn. Upon investigating the incident, the ship's captain searched George's cabin, finding unusual footprints under the window, as well as evidence of a disturbance on deck. George was missing, and footprints at the scene suggested there may have been a struggle, raising doubts about George's safety. The sudden disappearance of the newlywed couple spread quickly, causing passengers on the ship to become worried and scared. The crew cordoned off Deck 7 and restricted access to cabins while they searched for George and Jennifer. After finding blood, it was presumed that they had vanished under mysterious circumstances. The senior officer took charge of the investigation and went to their stateroom to gather more information. Based on the evidence, it was suspected that George might have fallen overboard. Meanwhile, the search for they continued on the other side of the ship. By 10 a.m., Jennifer was found in a ship spa, where she was receiving a pre-booked massage. She looked surprised and worried, claiming she had no idea where her husband was and hadn't seen him since the previous night. According to Jennifer, she woke up and found George not there, but she thought he was with friends or in another cabin. She then went to her spa appointment without giving his absence the second thought. At noon, Turkish authorities boarded the ship to investigate the disappearance of George. The captain reassured passengers that the investigation was necessary to understand what happened and hoped it would end quickly. The police began by questioning George's wife, Jennifer, who was visibly agitated and seemed to have limited information about her husband's disappearance. Jennifer told the police that she had last seen George the previous night and that Royal Caribbean staff had informed her that he may have fallen overboard. The discovery of blood on the boat's awning suggests that something terrible has happened to George. As a result, Jennifer became the main suspect due to her agitated state and apparent lack of knowledge about her husband's disappearance. The investigators then examined cabin 962, which was found to be in disarray, suggesting a possible struggle. In the bathroom, they discovered small drops of blood on the carpet and towel, as well as fingerprints on the balcony railing. Furthermore, 2 small blood stains, each approximately 2 centimeters long, were found on the bedding. The blood samples were later identified as belonging to George. George's disappearance from the cabin remains a mystery, and all evidence points to the fact that he experienced trauma before he disappeared. A chair on the balcony, positioned to allow someone to sit next to the railing, caught the investigators' attention. Marks on the railing suggested someone had indeed sat there, sparking suspicion that George might have fallen. However, the high railing and bloodstains on the boat's awning and inside the cabin hinted at a more sinister scenario: murder. Investigators have been trying to determine who George was with that night, and what may have led to his disappearance. The inquiry was in its early stages, but it was already clear that the case was complex and fraught with mysteries. The Turkish authorities boarded the ship to investigate George Smith's disappearance. They began by questioning the group of friends with whom the newlyweds had spent the previous night. As the investigation remained shrouded in mystery, every detail was crucial. They reported that George and Jennifer had consumed excessive alcohol, leading to George's intoxication. They claimed to have helped him back to the cabin, put him to bed, and removed his shoes before leaving him alone. However, they were unable to account for Jennifer's whereabouts and assumed she had returned to the cabin later. Notably, Josh Askin's testimony contained inconsistencies. He alleged that Jennifer had left the group to go with a casino employee named Lloyd, contradicting the assumption that she had returned to the cabin. Josh Askin and Jennifer have deep feelings for each other, and they have both openly expressed their feelings for George. However, when reviewing the security footage, the story is different. At 3:30 a.m., the footage showed Jennifer leaving with new friends, while George stayed behind. Furthermore, data from Lloyd's key card indicated that he returned to his cabin at 3:25 a.m., a fact confirmed by his girlfriend. This new information raised more questions and led investigators to suspect that Josh Askin may have been hiding some crucial details. As the investigation continues, each new revelation added more mystery to the story. On a different part of the ship, a young man named Greg Rosenberg was enjoying a family cruise with friends, including his cousin Zach Rosenberg and close friend Rostislav Kaufman. The 3 men, who all held American passports despite their Russian heritage, lived in New York City. Greg Rosenberg and Jennifer had started their evening at the casino, trying their luck at poker together. After the casino closed at 2:30 a.m., they joined their friends and decided to continue the party. The group headed to the ship's disco, where they danced and drank together, enjoying each other's company. Lloyd Bota, the casino manager, was also seen having a good time with the young men. The witnesses' accounts of the nighttime activities start to conflict with one another as the group members disperse to their cabins. It was already late, and they were visibly intoxicated. According to the ship's rules, passengers who were loud and behaved inappropriately would have their drink delivery blocked. When the staff refused to serve the drunk visitors, they remembered they had a bottle of absinthe they had bought on the island of Mykonos. However, the crew had forbidden passengers from consuming their own alcohol on board. Josh Askin returned to his cabin to retrieve a special bottle of wormwood wine that he said he had purchased earlier. It was later discovered that this absinthe was exceptionally strong, with an alcohol concentration of over 70%, making it one of the strongest drinks available. George decided to help his friend by hiding the bottle of absinthe in his shorts. However, an observant janitor noticed something unusual. A group of young men, including Greg, Zach, Rostislav, Josh Askin, and George, were drinking from the bottle. This incident was added to the investigation. That evening, not only the men were intoxicated. Jennifer, at first very alert and calm, then showed signs of intoxication. She began to stagger and at one point, leaned on Lloyd, the casino manager. Some thought she was trying to regain her balance, while others interpreted it as flirting. What happened next between Jennifer and George remains unclear. According to eyewitness accounts, they got into an argument, but it's unknown if they were joking or serious. At some point, Jennifer hit George, and it's unclear if it was playful or out of anger. Jennifer left the disco around 3:30 a.m., visibly intoxicated and stumbling. George stayed behind with his new friends. The staff's testimony was crucial in uncovering what happened next. Jennifer's unsteady walk caught the attention of the janitor, who had seen her and her friends drinking earlier. He helped her to the elevator and watched her turn right when she reached her deck. However, this is where the story takes a confusing turn. Her stateroom was on the left, but she headed in the opposite direction. Jennifer was found asleep in a hallway far from her room. 2 guards and a female duty officer used a wheelchair to return her to her quarters. When they arrived, the clock read 4:52 a.m. But her husband George was not there. The curtains on the balcony doors were closed tightly and remained still despite the breeze, raising questions about whether George had gone out to the balcony on his own after his friends left him in bed. Deputy Chief of Police Chit Hyman and his wife were in a neighboring cabin. They were awakened at 4 a.m. by a noise and heard loud sounds coming from George's stateroom, number 9062. Chit Hyman reported the noise to guest services and also yelled through the wall to try to quiet the disturbance. The noise stopped briefly, but then loud talking resumed for about 3 minutes. An argument on the balcony followed, during which someone said, "Good night," repeatedly, as if trying to make people leave. After that, there were sounds of furniture being moved, and finally a loud thud, like something had fallen. Chit Hyman decided to investigate a disturbance and opened the door to find 3 unidentified men. Other passengers also reported hearing a loud noise that sounded like a body hitting the boat's canopy, followed by a woman's scream. However, none of the eyewitnesses had conclusive evidence that a woman was inside the cabin at the time. According to witnesses, 4 young men entered the cabin, but only 3 of them were visible when they exited. This raised the question of whether one of them might have stayed inside to search for money from the newlywed couple, who had recently won a significant amount at the casino. The theory of a failed robbery attempt seems plausible, but there are inconsistencies in the alibis of the 3 boys, Greg, Zach, and Rostislav. They claimed to have been in another stateroom just minutes after Hyman saw the 3 unknown men. The key card records for George's stateroom confirm that they entered it at 4:05 a.m., but there is no record of them entering the cabin again. This has led to several theories about what might have happened to George Smith. Another theory suggests that George and Jennifer's drunkenness was not simply due to excessive alcohol consumption. Although they appeared relatively sober when they left the casino at 2:30 a.m., they were unable to return to their cabin on their own by 3:30 a.m., implying possible exposure to illicit substances. This idea is supported by the testimony of other casino visitors, who reported that George and Jennifer openly discussed having large sums of money, possibly from wedding gifts or casino winnings. Estimates of their wealth varied, but all witnesses agreed it was in the tens of thousands of dollars. The fact that George wore an expensive Breitling watch and Jennifer owned a valuable engagement ring further suggested they were wealthy. It's possible that their quarters were targeted by thieves searching for the money they had been boasting about. Two possible explanations have been proposed for the disappearance of George. The first theory suggests that the kidnapper may have injured George while trying to remove his valuable watch, resulting in bloodstains on the sheet. The second theory focuses on the effects of alcohol and hallucinogens. After discovering that the passengers had been drinking and finding footprints on the balcony, the captain suspected that an accidental fall overboard might have occurred during a scuffle. Particular attention has been paid to hallucinations caused by drinking wormwood wine, a beverage containing the active ingredient thujone. However, toxicology experts note that the concentration of thujone plays a crucial role in determining its effects. Importantly, absinthe sold in European countries today is strictly regulated, and the thujone concentration is limited to such a low level that it is incapable of causing hallucinations. The fact that the George actually purchased the wormwood wine in Europe makes it unlikely that it caused the hallucinations, as experts claim that the amount of alcohol required to produce such hallucinations would have to be extremely large. In reality, only black market absinthe with a much higher concentration could potentially cause hallucinations. In the investigation into George Smith's disappearance, the FBI conducted polygraph interviews with Jennifer and Lloyd Botha, and who both passed. However, Joshua Skin failed the polygraph, which may suggest that he is hiding something about George's disappearance. The investigation into George's mysterious death uncovered a significant piece of evidence, a videotape featuring 3 individuals, including Russians, making jokes about an incident. The FBI agents reviewed this tape, and a particular comment made by one of the men, "We gave him a lesson in paragliding without a parachute," suggests a potential connection to George's case. During the investigation in 2009, FBI agents interviewed Greg, Zach, Rostislav, and Joshua Skin as witnesses. However, Zach Rosenberg and Joshua Skin declined to provide a direct answer. Their answers remained vague, implying that they did not want to share full details of what happened. Another crucial witness was Greg Rosenberg, who was with the group of men entertaining on the night of the incident. He claimed they ordered food to their cabin that evening, providing a possible alibi for the Russian men. Nevertheless, inconsistencies were found in this statement. However, this information is incorrect. According to the ship's service records, their cabin was blocked from service that day. Staff were also specifically instructed not to serve the group that evening. Greg could not confidently say which passenger in the cabin had ordered food. Witnesses offered differing opinions on the nature of George and Jennifer's relationship, citing various observations and recollections. Greg believed it was challenging to gauge the quality of their relationship due to the group's heavy drinking. According to him, everyone in the group was extremely intoxicated, making it hard to determine the specifics of their interactions. There was a discrepancy in testimony as to whether Greg left the cabin immediately after ordering food. Joshua Skin provided information that Greg left the cabin after ordering food. However, Greg denied this statement, saying that he never left. This contradiction complicated the investigation, requiring further investigation to establish the facts. In December 2019, Greg Rosenberg was murdered, and the case remains unsolved. Investigators are exploring a potential connection between his death and that of George Smith. The mysterious circumstances surrounding George Smith's appearance have raised significant questions about his background and family. As details emerged, the situation grew increasingly complicated, with the actions of his relatives following the tragedy drawing scrutiny from both the public and law enforcement. The George family persisted in seeking answers and justice regarding George's disappearance. The case was moved from the FBI's Connecticut office to the New York office. The family offered a $100,000 reward for any information that could help identify and bring to justice those responsible for the crime. They also called for a boycott of the shipping company, which they believed was trying to cover up the incident to protect its profits. The incident also strained the relationship between George's parents and his young wife, Jennifer. Her behavior was closely scrutinized and many found her composure suspicious. She said she was acting on the orders of FBI agents, doing exactly as they told her. However, her hesitation to provide more information sparked suspicion. The George family, who were seeking truth and justice, became disheartened when Jennifer agreed to a $1 million settlement offer from the judgment company. This move appeared to them as a betrayal. They felt the Turkish authorities' investigation lacked transparency, and Jennifer seemed too hasty in accepting the offer, fueling their suspicions that she was concealing information and wasn't invested in uncovering the truth. In contrast, Jennifer says she has very few memories of what happened after 2:30 a.m. that night, unaware that the liner's staff had even found her in the corridor and escorted her back to her cabin. This satisfied with the Turkish investigation. The George family to take matters into their own hands by engaging independent forensic scientist Henry Lee to assist them. Henry Lee conducted a series of studies in the cabin and on the balcony that were not included in the official investigation. These studies could have revealed crucial information about the events surrounding George's death and potentially confirmed one of their main theories: murder or accident. According to Henry Lee, the height of the balcony makes it unclear whether George's fall was an accident or not. It is possible that a third party pushed him or that he was in a state of insanity and climbed onto a chair before falling. Henry Lee had planned to conduct an experiment to simulate a fall from the balcony, but the cruise line owner refused to allow it. George's relatives believe that this decision was made to obstruct their efforts to uncover the truth. Henry Lee also conducted investigations in the cabin, on the balcony, and on the boat, but the results of these investigations were not made public. Meanwhile, the FBI launched its own investigation, but many of its findings and discoveries were kept secret. The FBI's investigation into George Smith's disappearance focused on 4 young men who spent the night with him, as well as 3 Russians: Greg, Zach Rosenberg, and Rostislav Kaufman. However, their testimonies were inconsistent with those of other witnesses, adding to the mystery and confusion surrounding the case. Initially, Jennifer was a suspect, but she was eventually cleared of suspicion. The family then increased the amount of their lawsuit against the company and used the payout to secure the release of the investigation's results, including witness statements and other relevant information. Jennifer was left to cherish the memories of George and dedicated herself to charitable work in his honor. She later remarried, continuing to strive to make a positive impact in his memory. The FBI launched an extensive investigation into George Smith's disappearance, but it was ultimately unable to uncover the truth about his fate or recover his body. Due to lack of evidence, the case was eventually closed, and his death was officially classified as an accident. George's family continues to seek answers about the circumstances surrounding his death, and not being able to visit his grave and pay their respects is the greatest suffering for them. They remain hopeful that the truth will eventually come to light, bringing closure to the case. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Carol Maltesi. Carol Nicole Maltesi was born on September 19, 1995, in a small province in Italy, to parents Fabio and Josephine. Her mother was of Italian descent, while her father had Dutch heritage. When Carol was just 4 years old, her parents divorced, and she remained with her mother. Her father moved back to the Netherlands, where he remarried and had more children. Despite her father's lack of support, Josephine chose to stay in Italy and raise Carol on her own. Carol and her mother lived in a small community called Sesto Kenda. Her mother worked multiple jobs to provide Carol with a good education and opportunities for a better life. As a result, Carol grew into a beautiful, kind, and sociable young woman with many friends and an easy rapport with others. She was an active schoolgirl who participated in sports, such as horseback riding, and regularly attended a dance studio. Carol was fluent in 3 languages, loved traveling across Europe, and was an avid reader who could engage in conversations on a wide range of topics. As Carol entered her teenage years, she had many admirers and enjoyed being the center of attention. After completing her secondary education, Carol enrolled in a technical university to study industrial design, arts, and fashion. During her freshman year, Carol discovered she was pregnant after developing a romantic relationship with a young man studying architecture and design. The pregnancy was unexpected, and both Carol and her father were unprepared. Despite the challenges, Carol decided to keep the baby. In 2016, Carol, then 20 years old, gave birth to a son. The arrival of the baby significantly impacted her life. Due to financial constraints, she had to leave school to support themselves and their child. She relocated to Verona in search of better opportunities to provide for their family. Carol found employment as a sales consultant in a cosmetics and perfume retail chain when her son was 1 year old. Meanwhile, her boyfriend worked on projects from home and took care of their son. However, in mid-2019, Carol's life took another turn when she fell in love with Angelo. They began a passionate affair, secretly meeting in hotel rooms and exchanging messages at night. The affair lasted for about 6 months, during which they tried to spend as much time together as possible. But just before the new year, Carol's boyfriend discovered her infidelity and decided to end their relationship. Carol thought it was for the best that she was leaving, as she had already planned to move in with her new boyfriend. However, they faced a challenge. Angelo lived with his parents, and Carol couldn't join him with her child from a previous relationship. They decided to rent a place together, but their plans were disrupted, which left them jobless and unable to afford a home. Carol had to move into Angelo's parents' house and temporarily leave her 4-year-old son with his biological father. Carol struggled financially, but Angelo and his parents supported her as much as possible. She had to rely on them completely, unable to contribute to her son's care. To make matters worse, her mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which required expensive treatment. In desperation, Carol looked for ways to earn money from home to support her son and ailing mother. She turned to social media and created a YouTube channel, sharing her experiences of life in isolation. Although her content didn't attract much attention, her striking appearance drew comments, including some unwanted and inappropriate proposals. A subscriber suggested that Carol create an account on the adult content platform OnlyFans, citing her attractive appearance and potential for quick success. Taking this advice, Carol registered under the pseudonym Charlotte Angel and began posting intimate photos and videos. She quickly gained a large following and started earning a substantial income. As time went on, Carol's content became more explicit and bold and was appreciated by her fans. However, she keeps her work a secret from her boyfriend and relatives. This secrecy was short-lived because an acquaintance of hers discovered her account about 6 months later. Although Carol tried to justify her work as an art form that gave her financial security and personal fulfillment, her acquaintances did not accept it. Friends and acquaintances gradually distanced themselves from her, believing that her work was immoral and fearing that association with her would damage their reputations. Carol saw this reaction as prejudice and remained confident that she would achieve success and wealth as an adult film star. Carol's newfound popularity attracted the attention of adult film studios, and several directors approached her with offers to star in their productions. She soon accepted the invitation and participated in group photo sessions. Unbeknownst to her, her activities went unnoticed, and her boyfriend, Angelo, was shocked to discover that she was not working remotely as a designer as she had claimed she would. He felt lost and didn't know how to react because he had no plans to end their relationship. However, when Angelo's parents learned of Carol's profession, they urged him to end the relationship immediately, fearing she would bring shame to their family. At that time, Carol achieved financial stability thanks to her popular OnlyFans account and increasing salaries from film directors. In interviews, she expressed her intention to eventually complete her education and pursue a career in design or modeling. However, she increasingly loved her current job and was completely immersed in it. Despite her success, Carol faced constant moral pressure from those around her, who judged and tried to shame her. This led to certain psychological trauma. She defended her profession, calling it art, and supported women's right to choose a career without fear of judgment or social consequences. At the age of 25, Carol moved to Rescaldina, a small town in the province of Milan, with the intention of starting again. She planned to abandon her career in the adult entertainment industry and secure a job as a sales consultant at a perfume shop. However, this job of hers only lasted for a short time. A few months later, Carol met David Fontana, a 42-year-old local banker with a passion for photography, especially nude photography. They connected online, where David was searching for photo models for his projects. Carol reciprocated his offer, and upon their first meeting, they felt an intense mutual attraction. Despite being married, David pursued a relationship with Carol and they began dating. Their relationship involved photo sessions that often led to intimate encounters. David soon discovered Carol's past experience in the adult industry and encouraged her to resume her career, citing her talent. However, David's feelings for Carol were complex. He loved her, desired to possess her, and also enjoyed watching her in adult films. In March 2021, David divorced his wife and moved in with Carol, allowing them to explore their most explicit fantasies together. He assisted her in creating content for OnlyFans, a platform where she gained immense popularity. However, David took a share of the profits from their joint work. As Carol's success grew, she began receiving lucrative offers from foreign directors and studios for film shoots. David was a jealous boyfriend who would become annoyed when others showed interest in Carol in public or tried to flirt with her. However, he never interfered with her work as an adult film actress, treating it as a normal job that she felt comfortable with. On the other hand, after Angelo and Carol broke up, Angelo confessed that he had missed her and asked to get back together, saying that he would accept her profession and not restrict her freedom. Carol appreciated Angelo's efforts but revealed that she had already met someone else. Even so, Angelo and Carol continued to communicate. However, when David found out, he became angry, threatened Angelo, and burned his car and finally broke up with Carol. Angelo reported the incident to the police, who issued a restraining order against David, but ultimately found no evidence linking him to arson. As Carol's career took off, Carol frequently traveled for filming and attracted a large following. She was trying to buy a house for herself and her son and planned to leave the adult film industry to focus on raising her son. To achieve this goal, she started creating custom videos for fans, who would send her scripts and pay her to make their fantasies come true. This idea brought high profits to Carol. Carol and David continued to work together in film despite their personal separation. During a September 2021 film shoot, Carol met co-star Salvatore Galdo, and a romance blossomed. She and Salvatore eventually formalized their relationship, deciding to get married after taking the time to ensure they were both ready to move forward. As they planned their future together, they made a conscious effort to maintain their independence and keep their relationship private. They had learned from past experiences and wanted to approach their new relationship with a clear understanding of each other's needs and boundaries. In the end, Carol and Salvatore were able to build a strong foundation for their relationship, free from the entanglements of their past. They were able to move forward together, focusing on their shared future and leaving their complicated pasts behind. Carol's social media activity had slowed down significantly. Although new posts occasionally appeared on her account, she rarely interacted with anyone, keeping her responses brief. Her latest photos suggested she had recently gone on a seaside vacation, but she hadn't shared her plans with anyone. Everything was happening peacefully. But on March 20, 2022, in a deserted area near Italian Borno, a passerby had made a disturbing discovery. He had been walking along a cliff when he had spotted large black bags of trash on a slope near a body of water. He had felt uncomfortable seeing garbage in such a beautiful location, so he had decided to throw it away. When he had approached one of the bags, he had noticed that it was unusually heavy. His curiosity had turned to horror when he had seen human fingers poking out through the tear in the polyethylene plastic. The man who quickly contacted the police, and when officers arrived, they found 4 bags with a human body that had been divided into 18 parts. Due to the extreme disfigurement, identifying the remains seemed unlikely. Forensic analysis showed that the victim was a young woman who had been deceased for at least 2 months, but the cause of death could not be determined. It was clear that the body had been stored in a freezer before being thrown off a cliff in a remote area, likely with the intention of remaining hidden for a long time. Upon impact, the bags tore, spilling some of the contents. The perpetrator had attempted to conceal the victim's identity by removing any distinctive features, such as tattoos, although damaged remnants of these tattoos still existed. The skin in those areas had been severely damaged with burns from hot objects, cuts, and acid. Despite this, police were able to piece together fragments of the tattoos and compare them with a missing persons database. A breakthrough came when a news report about the body was broadcast, asking anyone who might recognize the described features to come forward. Shortly after, a woman who worked in adult films visited the police station and identified the tattoos as belonging to a colleague who had disappeared in early January. The actress knew the deceased as Charlotte, but did not know her real name. This new information was crucial, as it allowed police to establish the victim's identity and real name. Once her identity was known, it was revealed that she had become engaged to Salvatore Galdo, a colleague, shortly before her disappearance. However, Galdo had not reported his fiancée missing, which raised suspicions. He was detained as the first suspect, but he appeared genuinely distraught over his fiancée's death and puzzled as to why he was under suspicion. According to Salvatore, he had been in regular contact with his fiancée through messaging apps and social media, and he had proof of their correspondence. He claimed that Carol had caught sick and was self-isolating, which is why he hadn't visited her. When asked why he hadn't called to check on her, he said he had spoken with David Fontana, who lived nearby and had promised to care for her. Although Salvatore's story was unclear and unconvincing, his testimony led police to a second suspect who needed to be questioned. However, before police could search for David, he appeared at the station to report a missing person. This was a surprising turn of events. David had not been following the news and did not expect the body to be found so quickly. When he learned that Carol's body had been discovered and identified, he became worried. But when Salvatore was arrested, David realized the police would likely find him, as he had communicated with Salvatore by phone and fabricated a story about taking care of Carol while she had sick. When questioned, David appeared nervous and gave conflicting accounts of his relationship with Carol. He claimed he and Carol were close, but they had not seen each other in months and she had suddenly stopped contacting him. After hours of questioning, David finally cracked under the pressure and began confessing that he had accidentally killed Carol, claiming it had happened in early January during a filming session for a client who had paid a large amount of money. The script had called for him to tie and gag Carol, put a bag over her head, and brutally beat and torture her with tools, including a hammer. David and Carol had agreed that David wouldn't hit her too hard, but she would act like she was in a lot of pain. However, David claimed he had accidentally delivered a hammer blow and fractured her skull. When he removed the bag, he saw that she was about to die, but instead of seeking medical help, he had decided to end her suffering with one last blow of the hammer. But surprisingly, the investigation revealed that the mysterious customer was actually David, who contacted Carol using a fake account. He had come up with a revenge plan because Carol had wanted to leave him. At about 9 p.m. on January 11th, David had used a hammer to kill Carol. The next day, he had bought a large freezer using Carol's credit card, as well as a saw and axe from a hardware store, which he had used to dismember her body. David had attempted to disfigure her body to prevent identification by removing her tattoos and skin and attempting to burn and shred the rest. After murdering Carol, David stored her body parts in bags and kept them in a freezer for over 2 months. During this time, he deceived her relatives and friends by communicating with them through her phone and social media accounts, creating the illusion that she was still alive. By the end of March, David thought it was safe to dispose of the body and dumped it off a cliff in a remote area. He hoped that the remains would either never be found or would have decomposed beyond recognition by the time they were discovered. However, the body was found just 2 days later, and authorities tracked David down within a week. The most puzzling aspect of the case is that none of Carol's relatives or friends reported her missing, despite her disappearance occurring nearly 3 months prior. They were all convinced by the messages and social media posts David had created, and even her fiancé, who thought she was ill, didn't become alarmed when she failed to answer his calls or visit him. If someone had raised the alarm, David would have been tracked immediately through the signal from Carol's phone, which he had kept with him the entire time. At the trial, David expressed remorse and claimed he loved Carol, stating that her death was unintentional. He also said he had planned to end his own life after her death, unable to cope with the grief. Although this statement seemed implausible, the defense maintained that the incident was an unintentional act of violence. On June 12, 2023, David was found guilty of manslaughter. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison and ordered to pay compensation to Carol's son, Carol's mother, and the father of Carol's child, totaling €350,000. Notably, the court did not consider the manner of the killing to be cruel, and the dismemberment of the body was not deemed an aggravating factor. As a result, David may be eligible for parole in the future. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Natasha Cournoyer. Natasha Cournoyer, 37 years old, has gone missing suddenly and without any notice. She didn't visit her mother, respond to phone calls, or return home. As the day went on, it became clear that none of her friends or colleagues had seen her either. Her worried relatives reported her missing at 5 p.m., prompting a police investigation. Natasha worked as a public relations specialist for the Correctional Service of Canada. Detectives began by interviewing her co-workers. Upon arrival, they found her car still parked nearby. A nervous-looking man, Michel Trottier, was standing by her vehicle. He claimed to be in a relationship with Natasha and was trying to figure out where she might have gone. The back door of Natasha's car had scratches, but it was unclear if they were related to her disappearance. With no reason to suspect Michel Trottier of involvement, detectives continued their investigation. Co-workers reported that Natasha was at work on October 1, 2009, the day before she vanished. She seemed to be in a good mood, friendly, and untroubled, with no signs of anything amiss. On October 2nd, Natasha needed a day off to deal with issues related to her recently deceased father's tombstone. To make up for time, she worked longer hours on October 1st and left the office around 8 p.m. According to her friends, Natasha was a kind and open person with no known conflicts or enemies. The police launched a large-scale search for Natasha, involving aviation and canine units. Initially, they focused on the area around the parking lot but found no clues to aid the investigation. Natasha's friends and relatives distributed flyers with her photo, hoping someone might have information about her disappearance. The first few hours after a person goes missing are crucial in finding witnesses or evidence. However, in Natasha's case, valuable time was lost because the police weren't notified until the evening of October 2nd, 21 hours after she left work. The search for Natasha took place from October 3rd to 5th, but unfortunately, no leads were found. Her family offered a $10,000 reward for any information that could help locate her. Natasha's boyfriend, Michel Trottier, suspected she had been kidnapped and made a televised plea for her safe release. Meanwhile, the police were investigating their personal lives. They had been together for 4 years, but their relationship had been rocky, with multiple breakups and reconciliations. The police explored all possible scenarios surrounding Natasha's disappearance. They reviewed CCTV footage from her workplace, both inside and outside the building. The footage showed Natasha arriving at 9:04 a.m. and leaving at 8:07 p.m. She had parked her car in a poorly lit area of the parking lot, and the cameras captured her walking towards it. However, she eventually disappeared from view due to the darkness. After a few minutes, the car headlights turned on and the car started moving, but instead of heading towards the exit, it drove to the opposite side of the parking lot, which was also poorly lit. The car stopped and the headlights went out. The vehicle remained in this position for about 20 minutes before moving towards the exit. It was determined that this car was not Natasha's, as she owned a Mazda. Further investigation revealed that the car in the video was a Ford Windstar minivan, which had entered the parking lot at 6:35 p.m. and parked next to Natasha's car. Based on the video footage, the police concluded that Natasha Conoyer's disappearance was likely a kidnapping. On the 5th day of the search, October 6, 2009, the focus shifted from finding a missing person to investigating a homicide. Natasha's body was discovered in a vacant lot in the Point Au Trumbull area, approximately 20 miles from her workplace. The body was located next to a dirt road that led to the riverbank. The news of Natasha's death devastated her relatives and friends, who were further disturbed by the medical examiner's report. According to the report, Natasha's cause of death was strangulation. Additionally, she had suffered 9 facial injuries, including a broken nose, and had marks on her wrists and ankles indicating that she had been bound. Seminal fluid was also found inside her body, which would serve as a source of DNA evidence. While awaiting DNA analysis results, detectives attempted to identify the owner of a minivan captured on camera the day Natasha vanished. In 2009, there were 2 motels near Natasha's workplace. On October 16, 2009, 10 days after her body was discovered, police visited both motels to review guest registration cards. At the Lido Motel, they found a guest who had registered a Ford Windstar. The guest was 48 years old Claude LaRouche, a registered sex offender with 2 prior convictions. In 1993, Claude was sentenced to 1 year in prison and 2 years of probation for coercing a 19-year-old acquaintance into sex. In 2005, he received a 40-month prison sentence for attempting to kidnap a 7-year-old girl. She managed to escape and run to a neighbor's house. Claude's 40-month sentence for the attempted kidnapping of a child raises questions about the severity of his punishment. In November 2008, Claude was released and started working as a carpenter. He married a woman with 2 sons, and they all lived together in a house about a 10-minute drive from where Natasha Conoyer disappeared. Detectives found out Claude checked into a motel the night Natasha went missing. Forensic experts examined the motel room and discovered dark red stains on the carpet, which they sent for analysis. The same day, detectives visited Claude at his home. Since he had a prior prison record, the police already had his DNA on file. However, they needed time to compare it to the DNA found on Natasha's body. Claude claimed he didn't know Natasha but admitted to frequently visiting the Lido Motel because it was cheap. He told the detectives he was unhappy with his intimate life with his wife and often rented a motel room to meet women offering paid sex services. When asked about his whereabouts on October 1st, the day Natasha disappeared, Claude said he couldn't remember anything, including staying at the Lido motel. He attributed his memory loss to excessive substance use, but his memory partially returned soon after. On November 5, 2009, a month after the body was discovered, detectives returned to Claude LaRouche's house. This time, however, it was not for a conversation. DNA analysis revealed that the seminal fluid found in Natasha Cournoyer's body matched LaRouche's. Additionally, Natasha's DNA was detected in the motel room Claude rented and inside his car. Montreal police say there's no link between the crime and Cournoyer's job at Correctional Service of Canada, and the victim didn't know the suspect. Following Claude's arrest, Montreal Police Inspector Daniel Rousseau stated that citizens could now feel safer in public. The news of the arrest shocked Claude's neighbors, who described him as a friendly and polite individual. The next day, on November 6, 2009, Claude LaRouche became a suspect in Natasha Cournoyer's case. Initially, he denied any wrongdoing, but faced with substantial evidence, he confessed to taking Natasha's life. However, he claimed her death was accidental and not intentional. During his 2011 trial, two differing accounts of the events emerged, one from Claude and his defense team, and the other from the prosecution. According to Claude's testimony, he was waiting in a parking lot for a drug dealer on the evening in question. While sitting in his car, Natasha appeared beside him. He then attacked her, forced her into his vehicle, and shut the door. Afterwards, Claude conversed with Natasha, and she allegedly agreed to accompany him to a motel. Claude LaRouche experienced memory lapses, which left him unable to recall why he stood in the parking lot for 20 minutes or what he did during that time. However, he conveniently remembered specific moments that worked in his favor. According to LaRouche, Natasha offered to satisfy his demands in exchange for her freedom while they were in the motel room. He agreed, but after she fulfilled his requests, they got into an argument. Claude lost control, attacked Natasha, and ultimately strangled her. He then cleaned the room, moved her body to his car, drove home, and went to bed. The next morning, after the substances he had taken wore off, he realized the gravity of his actions. Claude chose to get rid of Natasha's body. As he drove to the location where the body was later found, he cut her documents and bank cards into pieces and threw them out the car window. However, it's crucial to remember that this account comes from LaRouche himself, and the more he shared, the more inconsistencies and questions emerged about his claims. According to Claude's testimony, the day after disposing of Natasha's body, he returned to the scene and covered her with a blanket, fearing she would freeze. He revisited the body again the next day to retrieve the blanket, worried that it would hinder her discovery. LaRouche's statements suggest that his actions were influenced by a clouded consciousness, leading to illogical decisions. He claimed he did not intend to take Natasha's life, which he attempted to convey to those present during the trial. The prosecution's case relied on physical evidence and a witness testimony. The witness stated that while walking his dog near the parking lot on the day Natasha disappeared, he saw Claude attempt to attack a jogger around 7 p.m. However, Claude retreated when he noticed the witness and his dog. Natasha Cournoyer was attacked an hour later. The prosecutor was convinced that Claude had bound and abducted Natasha, taking her to a motel where she ultimately lost her life. In June 2011, Claude LaRouche was found guilty and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. During the trial, it was revealed that just 2 weeks after Natasha's murder, Claude attempted to strangle another woman, Dominique Martel. However, she managed to fend him off by biting his finger. As a result, Claude was deemed a dangerous offender under Canadian law, rendering his prison sentence indefinite and significantly reducing his chances of early parole. Natasha had a peaceful and fulfilling life, with aspirations and objectives, all of which were brutally taken away by a man with a history of serious crimes. Despite his past, Claude was allowed to roam free, living among the community without adequate supervision. The fact that he had previously attempted to kidnap a 7-year-old girl raises questions about how he was able to reintegrate into society without proper monitoring. Natasha's loved ones continue to grapple with these unanswered questions, haunted by the thought that if the system had functioned correctly and Claude had been held accountable, Natasha might still be alive today. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Karen Buckley. Karen Buckley, a 24-year-old student, went missing after a night out with friends at a nightclub on April 11th. Born in 1991 in Cork, Ireland, Karen was the youngest child and only daughter of John and Marion Buckley. Growing up, Karen was known for her kind and caring nature, always willing to lend a helping hand. This trait greatly influenced her career choices. After graduating from St. Mary's Secondary School in Mallow, Karen pursued a degree in nursing at the University of Limerick. Her interest in occupational therapy eventually led her to Glasgow, where she enrolled in a master's program at Caledonian University. Karen arrived in Glasgow in January 2015 and moved into an apartment with 3 other female students who were also new to the area. On April 11, 2015, Karen and her flatmates went to a nightclub about 2 kilometers from their apartment. They arrived around 11:45 p.m. and had a great time. At about 1 a.m., Karen told her friend she was going to the restroom and would return soon. She took her purse and left her jacket on the table where the group was sitting. Her friends continued to enjoy themselves while Karen was away. After a while, they realized Karen had been gone longer than expected and should have returned by then. However, Karen was nowhere to be found. One of her friends searched the club for her but couldn't locate her. Trying to contact her by phone was also unsuccessful. She came with thought maybe Karen had gone home, but it was strange that Karen didn't tell anyone and left her jacket behind. The only explanation they could think of was that Karen might have met someone at the club and left with that person. With this thought in mind, they went to bed. However, when they woke up around noon, Karen's neighbors were surprised to find that she had not returned home. They called and messaged Karen on social media, but she didn't respond. Although they had only known Karen for a few months, they knew that this behavior was out of character for her. Instead of coming up with alternative explanations to reassure themselves, they decided to report her disappearance to the police and inform the Buckley family about what had happened. The Scottish police acted swiftly to find Karen, and her disappearance was publicized in the media. Her parents urged anyone with information to come forward. Meanwhile, detectives reviewed footage from the club's cameras and found evidence of Karen interacting with a mystery man. Within 36 hours, on April 13th, the man was identified as 21-year-old Alexander Pacto and was brought in for questioning. He confirmed that he had met Karen at the club and they had gone to his apartment on Dorchester Avenue, about 3 kilometers away. Alexander also revealed that they had been intimate. Around 4 a.m., Karen decided to leave Alexander's apartment and head home, despite his invitation to stay until morning. Alexander mentioned that during their intimate encounter, Karen accidentally hit her head on the bed corner, resulting in an injury and leaving blood marks on the sheets. The police reacted ambivalently to this information. While Alexander seemed genuinely open, he also appeared to be anticipating and justifying potential evidence that might be discovered in his apartment. On April 13th, a man reported finding a woman's purse to the police. Upon further investigation, it was revealed that the purse was discovered in the park near Alexander's residence, and it belonged to Karen. The purse contained her phone and identification documents. This new evidence lent credibility to Alexander's account of events, suggesting that something might have happened to Karen after she left his apartment. The search for Karen persisted, with hundreds of police officers thoroughly searching parks, forests, bodies of water, and abandoned buildings for any potential clues that could aid in the investigation. At that point, Alexander Pacto was the primary suspect, being the last person to have seen Karen. However, investigators kept his identity confidential and did not disclose any information about him. 2 days after Karen went missing, police entering Alexander's apartment with a search warrant, police were immediately struck by the strong smell of bleach. They also observed that the mattress on the bed was the wrong size. Small, dark red spots were discovered on the bed and in the bathroom, and samples were taken for analysis. Additionally, a toolbox and a large quantity of cleaning supplies were found in the apartment. A police dog trained to detect human remains indicated a potential find near Alexander Pacto's car. While awaiting a search warrant, detectives discovered that Alexander had taken his car to be cleaned the previous day, but the job appeared to have been done poorly. Upon searching the vehicle, investigators found small, dark red spots on the inside of the passenger door and sent samples to the lab for analysis. As the investigation progressed, suspicions mounted that Karen might not be alive, but the search for her continued unabated. After journalists uncovered the suspect's identity, a photo of Alexander Pacto appeared on the front page of a local newspaper the following day. This unexpected move by the press ultimately proved helpful to the investigation. A man recognized Alexander's photo in the newspaper and contacted the police, offering valuable information. He claimed to have worked with Alexander in the past and revealed that Alexander rented a warehouse on a farm outside Glasgow. This farm was approximately 9 kilometers from Alexander's apartment. The police pursued every lead and investigated this new information. The farm owner verified that Alexander indeed rented a storage space from him for £10 a week. Upon inspection of the storage space, the police discovered a 200-liter drum containing Karen's body, which had been dissolved in caustic soda, a highly corrosive alkaline substance capable of breaking down organic materials. They also found a bonfire with remnants of a mattress that Pacto had attempted to burn. On the same day, April 15th, the suspect in Karen Buckley's case was arrested. Faced with substantial evidence, Alexander admitted to taking Karen's life, but claimed it was in self-defense. Police reconstructed a timeline of events based on evidence and Alexander's testimony. On the night of April 11th to 12th, Karen left the club around 1 a.m. The reason for her departure remains unclear. Her friends reported no argument, stating Karen said she was going to the bathroom and would return. It is also unclear why Karen left her jacket behind, even if she had decided to go home. Officers investigating the case reviewed 1,900 hours of surveillance footage. One recording showed Karen encountering Alexander after leaving a club. They walked together towards his car, where it's believed he offered to drive her home. However, once inside the car, Alexander attacked Karen. He struck her 14 times on the head with a large wrench, resulting in her death. Investigators found dark red stains in the car, bathroom, and on Alexander's bed, later confirmed as Karen's dried blood. After disposing of her body, Alexander planned his next moves, starting with getting rid of Karen's purse, which was later recovered and given to the police. Around 2 a.m., he returned home and did something that shocked the detectives. He took the Karen out of the car and carried it into his apartment. Later, at 8 a.m., he used his phone to search online for information about caustic soda. He then visited a shopping center where he purchased 6 liters of caustic soda, a respirator mask, and gloves at 9:42 a.m. To get rid of Karen's body, Alexander realized 6 liters of caustic soda wouldn't be enough. He bought more from another store on his way home and put the body in the bathtub. However, since his neighbor would return home around 8 p.m. and he wouldn't have enough time, he wrapped the body in a blanket and hid it in his bedroom. The next day, April 13th, Alexander threw a wrench into the River Clyde, later found by divers. He then visited a nearby shopping center, about a mile and a half away, where he sought a consultant's advice on a product that could remove bloodstains from a mattress. He also purchased 2 padlocks that day. He took Karen's belongings to a farm and burned them. Then, he bought a barrel and took it to a rented warehouse. There, he poured in caustic soda and locked the gate with 2 new padlocks. Later that day, at 6 p.m., police visited his home and took him in for questioning. Alexander confessed to his crime, but his motive was unclear. He claimed he killed Karen in self-defense during a car argument, but investigators did not believe him. They thought he was trying to justify his actions. Police suspected that Alexander killed Karen to cover up another crime and then got rid of her body. However, the body was too decomposed to determine if Karen had suffered violence before dying. In September 2015, Alexander Pacto was found guilty and given a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 23 years. Through his lawyer, he apologized to Karen's family and expressed remorse. Alexander told his lawyer that he was too drunk on the night of the incident to remember why he killed Karen. If he had not pleaded guilty, he would have been eligible for parole in 25 years instead of 23. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Vanessa Marcotte. On August 7, 2016, 27-year-old Vanessa Marcotte visited her mother, Rosanna, in Princeton, Massachusetts. Vanessa, an active person who enjoyed outdoor activities like walking, yoga, and running, decided to go for a run on that warm and sunny day. She was scheduled to take a bus to New York City later that day, where she worked and lived. However, Vanessa failed to return home after her run, which was unusual for her. Her concerned mother, Rosanna, sought help from the police. The case drew widespread national media attention due to its rarity in Princeton, which had not seen a similar incident in 30 years. Vanessa Marcotte was born on June 17, 1989, in Leominster, Massachusetts. She was an exceptional student and graduated with highest honors from Boston University in 2011, earning a bachelor's degree in communications. After college, she worked at WordStream, an online marketing software startup in Boston, before becoming an account manager at Google's New York City office. Every couple of months, Vanessa would visit her mother and aunt in Princeton, a small rural town with a population of around 4,000. As an only child, Vanessa's mother, Rosanna, cherished their time together and looked forward to her daughter's visits. On Sunday, August 7, 2016, Vanessa left her mother's house on Brook Station Road around 1 p.m. to go for a run before catching the commuter bus back to New York later that day. The area she planned to run in was familiar to her. However, when several hours passed and Vanessa failed to return, her mother grew concerned and contacted the police. Officers promptly launched a search, focusing on the route Vanessa was expected to have taken. At 8:20 p.m., a police dog tracked a scent to a densely vegetated area about 60 yards from the road and less than a mile from Rosanna Marcotte's home. There, the search team found the body of a woman, who was quickly identified as Vanessa Marcotte. A preliminary examination revealed that her death was a result of a crime. Vanessa's body was found without clothes, and it had burn marks on her legs, hands, and face. The location where the body was discovered was secluded, with no nearby houses, only the road and woods on either side. Vanessa's cell phone and headphones were missing, and despite a thorough search of the surrounding area, police were unable to find them. Investigators believed that the perpetrator had intentionally taken these items to avoid leaving behind DNA evidence. A sneaker with burn marks was found next to the body, and similar burn marks were discovered in other locations. Detectives concluded that the perpetrator had used gasoline in an attempt to destroy DNA evidence. A forensic investigation into Vanessa's death revealed that she was killed by strangulation. Her struggles against her attacker resulted in the presence of an unknown person's DNA under her fingernails. The fact that her clothes were removed suggests a brief but clear motive. The medical examination found evidence of contact with a male. DNA testing did not produce a match in either local or national databases. The violent crime sent shockwaves through the small town of Princeton, with a population of under 4,000 people. The incident was highly unusual for the area, prompting widespread concern. Local authorities urged residents of Princeton and surrounding areas to remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity to the Massachusetts State Hotline or the Princeton Police Department. In a press conference on August 11th, Worcester District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. confirmed that the suspect is likely a male who sustained minor injuries, including cuts, bruises, and scratches, during the struggle with Vanessa. The news of Vanessa Marcotte's death sent shockwaves through her family, the Princeton community, and her co-workers. A Google spokesperson expressed the company's condolences, describing Marcotte as a beloved team member who worked in the New York office for a year and a half. She was known for her bright smile, dedication to volunteer work, and enthusiasm for Boston sports. Google is deeply saddened by her loss and is thinking of her family and friends. Boston University, Vanessa Marcotte's alma mater, also paid tribute to her. The university's executive director of media relations, Colin Riley, said, "We are heartbroken for her family and friends. They are in our thoughts and prayers." Initially, police investigated a possible connection between Vanessa Marcotte's death and the murder of another runner, Karina Vetrano, which occurred a few days earlier in New York City. On August 2, 2016, Vetrano went for a run in Spring Creek Park in Queens, despite her father's concerns about her running alone. She was last seen alive around 5 p.m., just before entering the park. When she failed to respond to calls and texts, her father alerted the police, who began searching for her around 11 p.m. Tragically, her father found her body face down about 15 feet from the trail. Karina Vetrano's murder shared similarities with Vanessa Marcotte's case, including the fact that her body was found exposed and she had been strangled. However, investigators initially did not believe the cases were connected. 6 months after Vetrano's murder, 20-year-old Chanel Lewis was arrested and later sentenced to life in prison without parole after his DNA was matched to evidence found on Vetrano's body. In contrast, the investigation into Vanessa Marcotte's murder remained ongoing. Detectives believed that Vanessa Marcotte killer likely lived in or frequently visited Princeton and was familiar with the area. They also thought that Vanessa Marcotte did not know her killer and that their encounter was accidental. To aid in the investigation, law enforcement set up separate 24-hour phone lines for the public to report any information. A key eyewitness came forward, reporting that they saw Vanessa stop at a local convenience store for a drink of water around 1 p.m. on August 7th. She was last seen walking and talking on her cell phone. The attack on Vanessa is believed to have occurred within 2 hours of her being seen outside the store. Her phone was last active at 2:11 p.m. and has remained off since. Despite an extensive search of the area where her body was found in the surrounding neighborhood, police initially found few leads. It wasn't until 3 months later that a new witness came forward with crucial information. The witness reported seeing a dark-colored Ford SUV parked near the crime scene on August 7th on 2 separate occasions. The first sighting was at 12:45 p.m., when the witness saw the driver, a Hispanic man between 25 and 35 years old, standing next to the vehicle and talking on the phone. The second sighting was at 2:05 p.m., when the witness drove by the same location and saw the SUV still parked, but with its hood down and no one in sight. This new information led authorities to launch a search for a Hispanic man who owns a black SUV and may live in the Princeton area. On February 23, 2017, 6 months after Vanessa's death, Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. released new details about the investigation. DNA found on Vanessa's body had been analyzed, and a suspect profile was created based on the DNA and witness statements. The suspect was described as a Hispanic male, 20 to 30 years old, with an athletic build, medium height, and short or shaved hair. He was believed to have had access to a dark-colored SUV on the day of the crime and to have suffered visible upper body injuries shortly after the attack. About 3 weeks later, a police officer in Worcester County spotted a man who matched the suspect's description. The man was driving a vehicle identical to the one seen on the day of Vanessa's death. The officer quickly noted the license plate number and identified the car's owner. The police then visited the owner's residence, where they found 31-year-old Angelo Colon Ortiz. Colin Ortiz was a 30-year-old husband and father of 3 who had recently moved to Worcester, Massachusetts, from Puerto Rico. He worked as a delivery driver for a FedEx contractor and was familiar with the Princeton area, where he often made deliveries. Despite his clean record, Colin's behavior was concerning to those around him. Neighbors in Worcester described him as having a perverse nature and often making vulgar comments to people in the neighborhood. A former Princeton postal worker also reported that Colin frequently made crude comments about her and other women to his co-workers. When questioned by police about the attack on Vanessa Marcotte, Colin claimed he did not know her and couldn't remember if he was in Princeton on the day of the incident. However, he did agree to provide a DNA sample, signing documents to allow his DNA to be analyzed. The lab took some time to process the DNA test, which ultimately revealed a match between Colin Ortiz's DNA and the DNA found under Vanessa Marcotte's fingernails on April 15, 2017. As a result, Colin was arrested and charged with the crime just 3 days later. Prosecutors presented evidence that on the day of the murder, Colin purchased $5 worth of gasoline from a store located 6 miles from the crime scene at 2:35 p.m. This suggested that Colin had returned to the scene after Vanessa's death in an attempt to destroy evidence, including his DNA on her body. The district attorney argued that the DNA evidence was collected through proper procedures, which led to the charges against Colin. However, Colin's attorneys countered that their client's DNA sample was obtained irregularly, casting doubt on the legitimacy of the evidence. The defense team argued that Colin Ortiz's language barrier hindered his ability to understand that providing a DNA sample to the police was optional. In fact, Ortiz stated that he was unaware that he could refuse to provide one. Colin, a U.S. citizen born in Puerto Rico, does not speak, read, or understand English, as he declared in an affidavit. He recounted that on March 16, 2017, 2 white state police officers visited his home with a translator who spoke a Spanish dialect that was unfamiliar to him. The trial extended for several years, ultimately leading to Judge Janet Kenton Walker's decision on January 11, 2022, to deny the defense's motion to suppress the DNA evidence. Colin maintained his innocence to the original charge of first-degree murder, but through a plea agreement, he pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of second-degree murder, which carries a shorter sentence. Angelo Colin Ortiz, 36, pleaded guilty to the robbery charge and was sentenced to life in prison in October 2022. As part of the plea bargain, Colin will serve 20 years for the robbery charge, followed by a life sentence with a minimum of 25 years before being eligible for parole. This means he will spend at least 45 years in prison before he can be considered for parole. The Vanessa Marcotte family agreed to the plea bargain to avoid a lengthy and emotionally challenging trial. In a statement, they expressed relief that the trial ended in a way that ensures Colin will no longer be able to harm anyone. Vanessa Marcotte's father stated that he is pleased that the monster will be kept off the streets and that he will not live to see Colin's parole hearing. Colin's sentence brings closure to the Vanessa Marcotte family, who can now find some comfort in knowing that justice has been served and that Colin will be held accountable for his actions. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ollie Kemp. Alexandra Ollie Elizabeth Kemp was born October 11, 1982, in Leawood. She was the oldest of 3 children and the only daughter of her parents. After graduating high school with honors, Alexandra enrolled at Kansas State University. Following her freshman year, she returned to her hometown of Leawood for summer break. During her break, Alexandra took a part-time job at a local outdoor swimming pool near her parents' house, where her younger brother Tyler already worked. The pool was a quiet neighborhood spot, catering mainly to local residents, and it still operates today. On June 18, 2002, Alexandra reported to work on an overcast day because resulted in fewer visitors than usual. At 5 p.m., Tyler arrived at the pool to start his shift, but his sister Alexandra was nowhere to be found. Her phone and purse were still on the table where she usually sat, which made Tyler confused and worried. He immediately called his parents to report that Alexandra had vanished. Their father, Roger Kemp, rushed to the scene and began searching for his daughter. He first checked the pool, but it was empty. Next, he went to the small pump room near the pool, which contained equipment for water purification, a ladder, and other items. Upon entering the pump room, Roger didn't see anything out of the ordinary at first. However, he soon noticed a leg protruding from under a tarp. As he lifted the tarp, he was met with a horrific sight: his daughter Alexandra, brutally beaten and naked from the waist down, with multiple bruises on her face and body. Roger quickly called 911 and spoke with the operator. When the ambulance arrived, Roger was performing CPR on his daughter. The paramedics took Alexandra to the hospital, but despite their best efforts, she sadly did not survive. Alexandra was declared dead shortly after arrival at the hospital. An examination revealed that the cause of death was strangulation, despite the presence of multiple severe injuries. A thorough investigation found no evidence of forced intimacy, although her body was partially unclothed. The police collected DNA samples from Alexandra's body and secured the pool area, searching for clues to identify the perpetrator. Evidence of a struggle was evident in the room where Roger discovered Alexandra's body, including her flip-flops found in separate locations. Additionally, an open bottle of antiseptic gel and its cap were found at the scene. A few days later, while the police continued to investigate, Alexandra's family and hundreds of mourners gathered to pay their respects at a funeral ceremony. Phil Howes, Alexandra's boyfriend since high school, was initially suspected in her death. As a pool administrator, he worked the morning shift on the day of her death, and Alexandra arrived at noon to start her 5-hour shift. Although Phil often stayed after work to spend time with Alexandra, he left promptly after his shift that day because they had plans for the evening. Despite being an early suspect, Phil had a solid alibi and was quickly cleared by the police. In an interview with detectives, Phil mentioned that Alexandra often felt uncomfortable being alone at work because some of the lawn maintenance workers would stare at her and try to flirt. The police investigated the lawn workers, but each of them had an alibi. However, the inquiry wasn't entirely fruitless. Several workers reported seeing a suspicious man with a video camera lurking in the bushes near the pool the day before Alexandra's death, apparently watching the female lifeguards in swimsuits. The police were given conflicting reports about Alexandra's final hours. Some people said she left the scene in an old Ford pickup truck, while others mentioned different circumstances. A study of Alexandra's mobile phone activity revealed that she had made plans with a friend, Laurel, to meet on the day she died. However, Alexandra didn't show up. When Laurel went to the police station to give her account of events, she explained that Alexandra had asked her to come to the pool to keep her company until her shift ended. According to Laurel, the pool was empty that day due to the poor weather, which made Alexandra anxious. When Laurel arrived at the pool at around 2:30 p.m., she didn't see Alexandra anywhere. Instead, a man she didn't know emerged from the pool house and waved at her with a smile. Laurel thought this man might be Alexandra's boss, and she decided to leave so as not to get her friend in trouble for socializing during work hours. At the time, she had no reason to think that anything was amiss. The police investigation led them away from Alexandra's workplace and to a completely different suspect. As a witness, Laurel provided a detailed description of the person she believed committed the crime. The police used this description to create a sketch of the suspect, who was identified as a white man around 30 years old, with a stocky build, short brown hair, and driving a 1980 Ford pickup truck. The suspect's identity was narrowed down when someone recognized the description as matching James Strader, a local mechanic who owned an old Ford pickup truck. James was questioned by the police and appeared to match the sketch, but he denied any involvement in Alexandra's death. His employer verified his alibi, stating that James was at work on the day of the murder. As a result, James was released from custody. While the police had eliminated James as a suspect, forensic analysis of evidence collected from the crime scene revealed male DNA on an antiseptic gel tube and on Alexandra's body. Unfortunately, the DNA did not match anyone in the police database, leaving the case still unsolved. Alexandra's family, friends, and boyfriend were ruled out as suspects after DNA tests showed no match with the DNA samples found on her body. The investigation was driven by Alexandra's father, Roger Kemp, who was determined to find his daughter's killer. After losing his child, Roger felt like he had lost his purpose in life. However, he found a new reason to keep going: justice for Alexandra. In an interview, Roger explained his approach: "You can either give up or keep fighting. I chose to fight." Impressed by his dedication, the police department gave Roger a workspace where he could collect and share information, and collaborate with the investigators. As they explored all available leads, Roger and the investigators contacted the popular TV show America's Most Wanted and asked them to feature Alexandra's case. The show's producers agreed, and her story was aired. The episode generated hundreds of calls from viewers with potential tips. Although the authorities thoroughly investigated each lead, none of them led to a breakthrough, and the case stalled once again. In February 2003, 8 months after Alexandra's death, a promising new lead emerged. Following a thorough investigation, police in Utah apprehended a suspect. 3 separate witnesses, including 2 women and a 14-year-old girl, came forward to report being forced into intimate encounters with a man. He had managed to evade capture initially, but was eventually tracked down and arrested in Utah. The arrested individual was identified as James Strader, the same person who had been questioned by Kansas police earlier. Notably, James bore a strong physical resemblance to the suspect's composite sketch. James was questioned by the police, but they failed to collect his DNA sample at the time. This might have been because his employer had convinced the police that James was at work on the day of the crime and had not left the premises. Despite this, James denied any involvement in Alexandra Kemp's death. Although he resembled the suspect in the composite sketch, James claimed he had not been near the pool on the day of the crime. He eventually provided a DNA sample for analysis. The results indicates that his DNA did not match the DNA found on Alexandra's body or the antiseptic gel tube. James was later imprisoned for unrelated charges, and the investigation into Alexandra Kemp's death hit a dead end once again. A year after Alexandra's death, the police still had no leads. Roger Kemp, Alexandra's father, and Phil House, her boyfriend, continued to fight for justice. Phil, who was also the president of the student community, sent the composite sketch of the suspect to students at other universities via email and asked them to watch an episode of America's Most Wanted that featured Alexandra Kemp's case. A year had passed, but the police and relatives' efforts had yielded no results in the Alexandra Kemp case. Undeterred, Roger Kemp, Alexandra's father, continued his quest for justice. He reached out to the America's Most Wanted program again, requesting a rerun of the episode about Alexandra's death. The show's creators asked if there were any new developments, and although Roger replied that there were none, his determination impressed them, leading to the episode being aired again. The rerun generated a fresh wave of calls to the police, prompting Roger to offer a $25,000 reward for any information that could help identify the person responsible for his daughter's death. The City of Leawood authorities increased the reward to $50,000. Roger also distributed flyers featuring his daughter's photo, a sketch of the suspect, and details about the reward. As Roger drove along the highway, he noticed billboards and realized they could be an effective way to raise awareness about the case. He began contacting advertising agencies to inquire about the cost of posting the information on a billboard. When he called the Lamar Advertising Company, the owner refused to take his money, offering to display the information on multiple billboards for free instead. Roger decided to publicize a sketch of the suspect and reward information on billboards along a major highway. The police received hundreds of tips, which took time to investigate. Notably, multiple tips mentioned the same individual, Teddy Hoover, who owned an old Ford pickup truck and worked in pool maintenance. His appearance matched the suspect's sketch, making it unlikely to be a coincidence. The police launched a search for Teddy Hoover and found his address in Kansas. When they arrived, Teddy answered the door, appearing surprised and nervous. However, this reaction didn't necessarily imply guilt, as many people become nervous when confronted by the police. When questioned about his whereabouts on June 18, 2002, Teddy claimed he couldn't remember, which was understandable given the year time lapse. Teddy denied any involvement in maintaining the pool where Alexandra worked. Nevertheless, the detectives asked him to provide a voluntary DNA sample to rule him out as a suspect. Teddy declined, stating he needed to consult with a lawyer first. He promised to contact the police after speaking with his attorney. The next day, Teddy's lawyer reached out to the investigators, expressing his client's concerns about his DNA sample being added to a database. Teddy reportedly believed in various conspiracy theories and feared that if he cooperated with the police, they would use the information against him in other cases. In an effort to alleviate his concerns, the investigators promised not to enter his DNA into any database and only use it to compare with the DNA found on Alexandra Kemp. The lawyer agreed to speak with his client and said he would call back. As they waited for the call, the police reviewed the case materials again and stumbled upon a piece of paper in one of the folders with a name that caught their attention. On the day of Alexandra's death, detectives began questioning onlookers who had gathered by the pool, trying to determine if anyone had seen anything suspicious. Interestingly, one of the people they spoke with was Teddy Hoover, who had claimed he had never been to the crime scene before. As the investigation continued, detectives grew increasingly confident that Teddy Hoover might be the man they had been searching for over the past 2 years. After several days, investigators contacted Teddy's lawyer to ask if his client was willing to provide a DNA sample. However, the lawyer responded by stating that his client had refused his services and broken off contact. Police immediately went to Teddy's house, but he had already escaped. As a result, the 29-year-old suspect was placed on the National Wanted list. Despite the efforts of the detectives, Teddy managed to evade capture for months. Billboards featuring his image were still up, but the search had yielded nothing. It wasn't until September 2004, when an anonymous caller contacted the police, that a new lead emerged. According to the caller, he knew the name of Teddy's girlfriend, with whom Teddy was living in Kansas. Detectives sought to locate Laura Barr, a woman connected to Teddy Hoover, but discovered she had left the state at the same time he escaped. This led them to investigate further. The U.S. Postal Service informed the Kansas State Police that Laura was receiving mail in Litchfield, Connecticut, along with a man named Benjamin Appleby, at the same address. The house where they resided was secluded and located in a rural area. Authorities suspected that Benjamin Appleby might be an alias for Teddy Hoover. To aid in the investigation, detectives from Leawood contacted the Connecticut State Police, requesting their assistance in locating Benjamin. It was discovered that he had a prior record in Connecticut, with an outstanding arrest warrant stemming from a 1997 incident where he had exposed himself to a schoolgirl. However, Benjamin had evaded capture and fled the state. With the existing warrant, detectives proceeded to the address associated with Benjamin's mail. Upon arrival, they found him at home and immediately took him into custody. As suspected, Benjamin Appleby was confirmed to be Teddy Hoover. It was revealed that while detectives in Kansas had been seeking a DNA sample from Teddy in connection with Alexandra Kemp's death, he had returned to Connecticut and resumed using his real name, attempting to maintain a low profile and escape notice. To apprehend Benjamin, detectives from Leawood traveled to Connecticut, anticipating that he would once again claim innocence. Before bringing him in for questioning, they devised a plan to unsettle him. They filled the interrogation room with crime scene photos and pictures of Alexandra, and placed folders with his name on the table, creating the illusion that the investigation had substantial evidence against him. When Benjamin entered the interrogation room, he was visibly shaken and unable to speak. A detective confronted him, inquiring about the implications of obtaining his DNA sample. Shortly after, Benjamin broke down in tears, confessing to Alexandra's death. He then recounted the events of the fateful June day, explaining that he had noticed Alexandra, found her attractive, and attempted to flirt with her. When she entered the pump room, he followed her, locked the door, and trapped her inside. When Benjamin touched she fought back, leaving him feeling humiliated. In a fit of anger, he attacked her, beating and strangling her until she lost consciousness. Benjamin then attempted to take advantage of her body, undressing her partially. He retrieved a tube of antiseptic gel from a first aid kit, intending to use it as a lubricant. However, just as he was about to proceed, the sound of a car horn distracted him. The victim's friend, who was waiting in a car behind a fence, had noticed something was amiss and sounded the horn. Fearing he would be caught, Benjamin hastily covered the body and fled the scene. Later, Benjamin returned to the area, where he encountered Alexandra's friend, whom he greeted with a smile and a wave, trying to appear nonchalant. He then got into his pickup truck and drove away. Hours later, Benjamin returned to the crime scene again, this time blending in with the crowd of onlookers gathered near the pool. The DNA evidence ultimately led to Benjamin's downfall. Tests revealed that the DNA found on the tube of antiseptic gel and on Alexandra's body matched Benjamin's. Thanks in large part to the efforts of investigator Roger Kemp, the police were finally able to identify the man responsible for Alexandra's murder, more than 2 years after the crime was committed. Benjamin Appleby claimed he initially wanted to plead guilty to avoid putting Alexandra's family through further emotional distress. However, at his first court hearing, he suddenly declared his innocence, stating that his confession was made under duress. Despite this, DNA analysis revealed that his DNA was the only sample found on the victim's body, making it difficult to dispute his involvement. Benjamin's lawyers attempted to argue that their client did not intentionally take Alexandra's life, admitting that he was responsible for her death but claiming it was not premeditated. However, forensic experts pointed out that Benjamin had strangled Alexandra for approximately 10 minutes, during which time he could have stopped but chose not to. The prosecution argued that Benjamin's sole intention was to observe Alexandra. On the day of the incident, June 18, 2002, the pool area was empty due to cloudy weather, allowing Benjamin to take advantage of the situation. He was found guilty by a jury in December 2005 and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 50 years, as well as an additional 19 years for attempting to force Alexandra into intimacy. In 2019, Benjamin appealed the decision, but the court upheld the life imprisonment sentence for first-degree murder. The Court of Appeal also ruled that the attempt to force Alexandra into intimacy was already taken into account during the initial sentencing. Benjamin was sentenced twice for the same crime, prompting the court to overturn the second conviction. However, even if Benjamin is released on parole, he will be 81 years old by that time. The authorities involved in the case credit Roger Kemp's persistence for helping them catch the culprit. While Benjamin was in prison, Roger and his wife established a self-defense program for girls, teaching thousands of girls and women across the country basic self-defense techniques. Roger Kemp's tireless efforts to bring attention to the case and his work in creating a safe community did not go unnoticed. He was awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal by Barack Obama at the White House. Until his passing at 77 on March 1, 2022, Roger continued to work for the foundation he established in his daughter's name. His ultimate goal was to make a difference in at least one person's life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney. This story began in 2016 in the Argentine city of Mendoza. On January 10th, two young women, 21-year-old Marina Menegazzo and 22-year-old Maria Jose Coney, embarked on a highly anticipated trip. Unfortunately, their journey ultimately led to one of the most publicized investigations in Latin America over the past decade. At the time, Maria Jose was a 22-year-old economics student at the National University of Cuyo, while Marina was a 21-year-old speech therapy student at the Aconcagua University. Both women volunteered for an organization that assisted homeless individuals. According to friends and acquaintances, they were two bright and cheerful young women who were extremely close to their families. Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney embarked on a trip with two friends, but the group eventually parted ways. They girls continued their journey, which began on January 10th. Their route can be tracked through Maria Jose Coney's Instagram posts. On January 13th, they were in Cusco, Peru, an ancient city that was once the capital of the Inca Empire. The next day, January 14th, another photo was posted, also taken in Cusco. A subsequent image was published on January 15th, showing they on a railway bridge near the Machu Picchu hydroelectric power plant. Machu Picchu is a famous ancient Inca city, often referred to as the city above the clouds, and is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Maria Jose Coney and Marina Menegazzo had about 10 days of vacation left and were in no rush to return home. They decided to revisit Montañita, the town in Ecuador where their trip had begun. On February 22nd, Maria Jose Coney posted a photo of herself with Marina Menegazzo on Instagram, which would be her last post. On the same day, they contacted their families in Argentina to let them know they would be returning soon. They planned to take a bus from Ecuador to Lima, Peru, where they would spend the night at a friend's house. From Lima, they would fly to Santiago, Chile on February 25th, and then take a bus to their hometown of Mendoza, Argentina. They informed their relatives that they would be unreachable by phone for a few days due to poor signal reception. However, when their relatives tried to contact them, they were unable to get in touch. As the days passed, there was no activity on Maria Jose Coney and Marina Menegazzo's social media accounts, causing their relatives to become increasingly worried. Marina Menegazzo's sister took to social media to raise awareness about their disappearance. She posted a photo of they girls with a message stating that they had gone missing on Monday, the 22nd, in Montañita, Ecuador, and asked people to share the information. The families were eager to know if they had left the country and boarded a flight, but their attempts to contact the airline were met with no response. The family of Maria Jose Coney and Marina Menegazzo tried to get information from they were supposed to stay with before leaving, but they claimed they never showed up. The family then reported they missing to the emergency services in Ecuador and also contacted the Argentine consulate for assistance. The Argentine consulate got involved on February 27th and sent the fingerprints to Ecuador. This was done because a few days earlier, on February 25th, an unidentified woman's body was found in Monteñita and taken to Guayaquil. The authorities compared the fingerprints from Argentina with those of the unidentified body and confirmed that the body was that of Maria Jose Coney. On Saturday, February 27th, police investigated the area where Maria Jose Coney's body was discovered and found the body of Marina Manazzo just 43 yards away. Like Marina Manazzo's body, Maria Jose Coney's was also wrapped in a plastic bag and duct tape. According to the Ecuadorian police, the killer attempted to conceal Marina Manazzo's body by placing an object on top of it, which initially prevented its discovery. During the autopsy, the medical expert determined that Maria Jose Coney's death was caused by severe blunt force trauma to the head. Her injuries also included a broken leg, a broken toe, and what authorities described as genital injuries. Additionally, markings on her wrist suggested that she had been restrained. Marina Manazzo died from 6 stab wounds to the neck and had similar wrist markings, indicating that she had also been tied up. The deaths occurred on February 23rd. Toxicology tests revealed that their blood contained a high amount of a psychiatric medication. Based on the circumstances of their deaths, police believed that they had not taken the medication voluntarily and may not have even known they had ingested it. It is likely that someone had mixed the medication into their food or drinks without their knowledge. A breakthrough in the case came just 24 hours after the discovery of the second body. The President and Interior Minister of Ecuador announced that the police had made an arrest, sparking mixed emotions among the victims' families. Alberto Segundo Mina Pon, 33, and Aurelio Eduardo Rodriguez, 39, were taken into custody and quickly confessed to the crime, revealing the events that had transpired. Physical evidence found at the home of one of the suspects, Mina Pon, included bloodstains. The police also recovered Marina's phone, backpack, and other belongings near the house. The rapid arrest and immediate confession of the men were met with skepticism by those following the case, leaving many with unanswered questions. Ecuador's Minister of the Interior, José Serrano, claimed that they checked out of their hotel room on February 22 at 2 p.m. According to the men's story, they had their money stolen at the hotel, prompting them to hitchhike to Lima. However, the hotel owner disputed this claim, stating that there was no evidence of theft. Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Coney's families found this explanation hard to believe, particularly since they had credit cards that they could have used if they encountered financial difficulties. The lack of activity on the credit cards suggested that either someone stole both the cash and cards or that the men's story was not true. Moreover, they could have accessed the funds in their account without needing the physical card, but they didn't use the money to book travel or accommodations online. According to Ecuador's Minister of the Interior, Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Coney's entered a bar and requested 2 glasses of water because they were thirsty and had no money. The bar owner corroborated this account, stating that she provided them with water due to their financial situation. However, it remains unclear whether the money was actually stolen. The minister continued by referencing the testimony of the suspects, who had already confessed to their guilt. One of the suspects, Pon, stated that around 8 p.m. on that day, Rodriguez informed him about 2 Argentinian girls in a bar. Pon and Rodriguez approached they and started a conversation, during which Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Coney explained that they were hitchhiking to Lima because they lacked the funds for a bus ticket. This version of events raises several questions. They had purchased plane tickets from Lima to Santiago, Chile, which is over 1,000 miles away. It seems illogical that they would try to save money by hitchhiking and risk missing their flight, which was scheduled for February 25th. This conversation with Pon allegedly took place on the evening of February 22nd, making their decision even more puzzling. However, local police found witnesses who corroborated this unusual story. Since Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Coney had no money for a hotel or hostel and needed a place to stay for the night, Pon offered to let them stay at his house. They accepted his offer. A taxi driver was found who confirmed that he drove Marina Manazzo, Maria Jose Coney, and Pon to Pon's home. This picture is of the house where Pon resided. After that, Pon returned to the bar with Rodriguez, as reported by Ecuadorian authorities, and continued drinking. Meanwhile, Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Coney were left alone in the house. The intoxicated men returned home around 2:30 a.m., but Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Coney were no longer there. The police investigation revealed that Marina Manazzo va Maria Jose Coney had visited a nearby store to purchase soda before returning to the house. A store cashier confirmed this, indicating that Marina Manazzo va Maria Jose Coney still had some money on them. According to Pon's account, when they returned to the house, he stayed in one room with Maria Jose Coney, while Rodriguez was in another room with Marina Manazzo. Pon admitted that he attempted to persuade Maria Jose Coney into a romantic encounter, but she resisted and tried to leave. In a fit of rage, Pon grabbed a stick and struck Maria Jose Coney on the head, killing her instantly. At the same time, he heard a scream coming from the other room. Upon entering the room, he found that Rodriguez had also taken Marina Manazzo's life. Rodriguez immediately fled the scene, leaving Pon to contemplate how to dispose of the bodies. Pon attempted to erase all evidence from the house by wrapping the bodies in plastic bags and duct tape. In the afternoon, he borrowed a cart from an acquaintance and transported the bodies to a wasteland near the ocean shore, approximately 440 yards from his home. It is essential to note that this account is the official version provided by the Ecuadorian authorities. However, this narrative leaves several questions unanswered, including the origin of the marks on her wrists and the presence of a potent drug in the blood of both girls, as revealed by toxicological analysis. Her family questioned the Ecuadorian authorities' account due to numerous inconsistencies in the case. They suspected a possible connection to human trafficking and believed the authorities might be protecting someone. The family's doubts were fueled by several factors. They had run out of money but did not use their credit cards, suggesting that they may have been coerced or deceived. Additionally, it was reported that they were under the influence of drugs, which raised suspicions about their supposed activities. Notably, the only people who claimed to have seen Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Coney on the day of their disappearance were a select few who corroborated the authorities' version, including the owner of the bar, a taxi driver, and a cashier who allegedly sold soda to one of they. Furthermore, the town's relatively small population of 5,000 residents made it surprising that no one else came forward as a witness. The families of the victims were confused by several aspects of the case. They couldn't understand why the bodies were found 2 days apart, despite being only 43 yards away from each other. It also seemed strange that Marina Manazzo va Maria Jose Coney had sought help from Pon and Rodriguez, rather than approaching one of the many Argentine tourists in the area. The brother of one of the victims reported seeing used syringes on the floor when he was taken to the crime scene by the Ecuadorian police. However, when he asked about them, the syringes mysteriously disappeared. Furthermore, the syringes were not visible in crime scene photos, and the experts who examined the area denied their existence. The family suspected that Pon and Rodriguez were involved in something more sinister, such as human trafficking, and that they were being used as a cover. The authorities responded by scheduling a second autopsy and a new toxicological examination. Additionally, it was discovered that both defendants had repeatedly changed their story about the events surrounding Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Coney deaths. According to one version, Pon denied involvement in the crime and instead claimed that the perpetrator was a Venezuelan illegal substance dealer known as El Chamo, who lived in the area. However, when questioned by the police, El Chamo denied any involvement and offered to take a polygraph test or provide a DNA sample to prove his innocence. The crime scene yielded several DNA samples, including those from Pon and the deceased girls, as well as some unidentified samples. Further testing revealed that the unidentified samples did not match Rodriguez, who was suspected of being Pon's accomplice, nor El Chamo, who was ultimately ruled out as a suspect. A second autopsy, conducted by Argentine experts, revealed that the girls were in a state of vulnerability and unable to defend themselves before their deaths. The autopsy also confirmed that they were subjected to forced intimacy before being killed. The autopsy revealed additional details, including that Maria Jose Coney had bruises and scratches only on one side of her body, suggesting she may have been ejected from a moving vehicle. Furthermore, a new toxicological analysis confirmed that both girls had been given a potent psychiatric medication that can impair a person's willpower. A disturbing reaction swept across Latin America following the incident. Unfortunately, the public's response often blamed the victims, and in this case, they were held responsible for their own deaths. Not only were they criticized by ordinary internet users, but also by well-known public figures. During the same time, Berlin hosted a tourism fair where Rira gave an interview to a German news agency. Her comments were alarming, as she stated that the deaths were inevitable given the way they traveled. She also revealed that she had never visited Montanita, a popular tourist destination, because it didn't match her social status. These comments were essentially victim blaming at the state level, which is a sad and concerning fact. Following an interview with Riva Dera, the Ecuadorian government issued an apology to the families of Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Coney, and one woman was fired. Among those heavily criticized was Argentine psychiatrist Hugo Narton, who described they as favorable victims and implied that they provoked others to commit crimes. However, after intense backlash, Dr. Narton claimed he had been misunderstood and emphasized that he never intended to excuse or absolve criminals of their responsibilities. A Paraguayan student, Guadalupe Aosta, wrote a Facebook post in response to online comments that blamed Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Coney for their tragic fate. The post went viral, receiving over 700,000 reposts in the first week. It began with the haunting words, "Yesterday, I was killed." The post went on to describe the violent events. "I refused to be touched, and they smashed my skull open with a stick, leaving me broken. They put me in a black plastic bag, sealed with duct tape, and threw me on the beach, where I was later found a few hours later. The aftermath of my death was more devastating than the act itself. When my body was found, no one bothered to investigate who had taken my life. Instead, I was bombarded with irrelevant and insensitive questions. What was I wearing? Why was I alone? Why did I, a woman, dare to travel by myself? I was in a high-risk area, so what did I expect? The authorities even had the audacity to suggest to my parents that I must have done something wrong, that I must have broken some rule. In death, I realized that I was not considered equal to a man. My demise was somehow my fault, and that's the narrative that would be perpetuated. But if the headlines had read, 2 young men found dead, the public would have been outraged, demanding justice and severe punishment for the perpetrators. The response would have been vastly different if I were a man. I'm speaking out for myself and for all the women who have been silenced, marginalized, and oppressed. I'm speaking out for every woman who has had her dreams crushed and her life destroyed. I urge you to raise your voice, to fight for justice and equality. I'll be with you in spirit, and I promise that one day, there will be so many of us standing together that our voices cannot be silenced." The trial started on August 8, 2016, but was marred by several setbacks. The prosecutor changed 3 times, causing significant delays in the process. Despite these challenges, the prosecution presented a substantial amount of evidence, including witness statements and over 200 physical items collected from the crime scene. The police had found some of the victims' personal belongings, biological fluids, and phones at the house where the crime took place and in the surrounding area. During the trial, Pon maintained his innocence, claiming that his earlier confession was made under police pressure. This statement only reinforced the suspicions of the victims' families that the Ecuadorian authorities were withholding information. Meanwhile, Rodriguez altered his testimony, suggesting that Colombian dealers of illicit substances were involved in the deaths. In the trial's first week, the prosecutor revealed that he suspected additional individuals were involved in the case. This suspicion was based on the discovery of 3 more male DNA samples at the crime scene, in addition to the DNA of Rodriguez and Pon. Ultimately, the court found both Pon and Rodriguez guilty, sentencing them to 40 years in prison, the maximum penalty allowed under Ecuadorian law. In November 2016, Ecuadorian authorities arrested José Luis Pérez Castro, a 34-year-old man, after finding his DNA at the crime scene. Castro's defense team claimed that he had lived in the house a few weeks prior to the incident and that his DNA was present due to a dental infection. They alleged that he had spat blood onto the wall as a result of this infection. However, the defense's explanation for the presence of Castro's DNA on the victims' bodies was that he must have touched an object or piece of furniture that the police had also handled, thereby transferring his DNA. This argument began to fall apart when a dentist testified in court. It was revealed that Castro had contacted the dentist 2 weeks after the bodies of Marina Manazzo and Maria Jose Coney were discovered, asking for a note to confirm his alleged dental infection. The dentist refused to provide the note, as he found no evidence of any health issues during his examination of Castro. A man was ejected from a dentist's office after seeking a medical certificate. The dentist refused to issue one, explaining that there needed to be an underlying medical condition causing pain, which he didn't observe. This denial dismantled his defense. Meanwhile, while awaiting trial, Castro broke prison rules by posting on social media about his situation. In a statement, he expressed confidence that God would ultimately prove his innocence. Despite his persistent claims of innocence, Castro was ultimately found guilty and received a 40-year prison sentence, just like 2 others, Alberto Pon and Eduardo Rodriguez. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Adrienne Robert. Adrienne Robert was born on January 4, 1983, in Brunswick, Maine. She graduated from Leavitt High School in Maine in 2001 and the University of Maine at Augusta in 2005. 2 years later, in 2007, she relocated from Maine to Clearwater, Florida. Those who knew her described Adrienne as a beautiful, kind person, always happy and vibrant. At the time of her disappearance, Adrienne was in a relationship with her boyfriend, Justin, and they were planning to start a life together. She was renting a house with her friend Jay. As their relationship progressed, Adrienne and Justin found a new house in July 2012, where they intended to move in together. On the evening of July 13, 2012, Adrienne decided to throw a goodbye party before moving out. Adrienne told Justin that she and Jay would be going out to a movie or a bar. Justin couldn't join them because he was busy with some other things. He didn't object to Adrienne spending the evening with Jay, as they were close friends. Initially, Adrienne and Jay celebrated at home, reminiscing about good times and having a few drinks. Later, they decided to continue the night out and went to the Diamond Doll strip club. Jay called 911 at 3:34 a.m. to report that he had found his roommate, Adrienne, unresponsive. He told the operator that they had been at a nightclub earlier, but Adrienne had left before him. When Jay arrived home, he discovered Adrienne on the bathroom floor, her eyes open but not breathing. There were also signs of a struggle, suggesting a crime had taken place. The 911 operator instructed Jay to focus and perform CPR on Adrienne, guiding him through the process. Jay followed the instructions, attempting to revive Adrienne until the paramedics arrived. Unfortunately, By the time the ambulance arrived, Adrienne was deceased, and the medics were unable to help her. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The police investigation aimed to answer two key questions: who was responsible for Adrienne's death, and was her roommate involved? The police began by thoroughly searching the house, checking every closet and under every bed to ensure the perpetrator was not hiding inside. Detectives and forensic experts observed that there were no signs of forced entry on the front door when they first arrived at the crime scene. Adrienne's body was found on the bathroom floor, wearing only a bra. A stab wound to the chest was the cause of death. The signs of a struggle in the bathroom suggested that Adrienne had tried to defend herself, leading detectives to suspect that the killer was a man. The detectives had to wait for the autopsy results to get more information. While searching Adrienne's bedroom, they noticed that someone had cut off a piece of her bed sheet. It seemed like the killer was trying to destroy evidence, possibly to eliminate any DNA they may have left behind. However, it was puzzling that the killer didn't take the entire sheet, as the remaining part could still contain DNA. Further investigation revealed a substance similar to seminal fluid on the sheet, which was sent to the lab for analysis. Additionally, Adrienne's car was missing from the parking lot next to her house, suggesting that the killer may have stolen it. The police launched an investigation into the crime, searching for potential witnesses and issuing an alert for the victim's car. To piece together the events surrounding Adrienne's death, detectives needed to gather as much information as possible about her final hours. Before proceeding, however, they had to break the devastating news to her family. Adrienne's parents were stunned by the revelation, struggling to come to terms with the loss of their beloved daughter. Justin discovered the shocking truth the morning after, when he saw police surrounding her house. He immediately sensed something was terribly wrong. The detectives then broke the devastating news: Adrienne had been killed the previous night. Given that perpetrators often return to the crime scene, and Justin's close relationship with Adrienne, the detectives felt compelled to investigate him as a potential suspect. In cases like this, it's standard procedure to investigate the people closest to the victim first. Later that day, police found Adrienne's car abandoned just a few blocks away from her house, with the headlights still on and the keys in the ignition. This discovery further supported the investigators' initial theory that the killer had likely used Adrienne's car to escape the crime scene. Forensic experts thoroughly searched the interior of Adrienne's car for any clues that could help crack the case. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed the CCTV footage to identify the person who was driving the car. Although there were no cameras at the exact location where the police found the car, neighboring buildings had cameras that captured footage of the area. After examining the recordings, investigators spotted a man wearing shorts, a baseball cap, and long hair. The man was seen walking away from Adrienne's car around the same time the 911 call was made. He was heading in the opposite direction, which made it essential for investigators to track his next move. Unfortunately, their attempt to follow him was thwarted when they discovered that he turned a corner where there was no surveillance camera. The investigators rewatched the footage multiple times, hoping to pick up on a detail they might have missed initially. The police had difficulty gathering clear information about the man in the recording because it was taken at night. However, interviewing witnesses provided new leads. A neighbor reported seeing Adrienne and a man running past his house on the sidewalk at night. This was unusual for two reasons: it was late, and they didn't appear to be going for a run. Adrienne was wearing a dress and holding her shoes, while the man was not dressed in athletic attire. Although the situation seemed suspicious, Adrienne didn't appear to be in distress, as she wasn't screaming or calling for help. As a result, the neighbor didn't think much of the incident at the time. To reconstruct the events leading up to the 911 call, investigators spoke with Adrienne's roommate, Jay. Jay had gone to the club with Adrienne and claimed to have found her on the bathroom floor. During questioning, Jay told the detective that he and Adrienne had a few drinks at home before heading to Diamond Dolls, a club they often visited to unwind and escape their daily problems. Jay told investigators that he and Adrienne walked to Diamond Dolls because they had been drinking and didn't want to drive. The police focused on the club because it attracted a questionable crowd. Jay claimed they arrived around 10:30 p.m. and stayed for several hours. While they were sitting at a table, a stranger with a beard and a baseball cap joined them. Later, Adrienne decided to leave, and Jay said he stayed behind. He noticed the stranger had also left. To verify Jay's story, investigators reviewed the club's surveillance footage. They found a camera with a wide angle that recorded everyone entering and leaving the club that evening. The footage showed Jay and Adrienne arriving at the club, appearing calm and normal. Another camera at the entrance provided a clear view of people's faces and clothing. CCTV footage confirmed Jay's account of events. It shows him leaving the club alone at 2:53 a.m. and walking towards his house. The footage also reveals that Adrienne left the club earlier, at 1:38 a.m. Notably, she was seen wearing a dress and what appeared to be a jacket when she arrived at the club, but only wore the dress when leaving. This discrepancy raises a key point. Shortly after Adrienne departed, a man wearing a baseball cap rushed out of the club, presumably to return the jacket she had left behind. After returning the jacket, the man and Adrienne appeared to be engaged in conversation. The exact topic of their discussion remains unclear. Rather than returning to the club, the man followed Adrienne. After exiting the parking lot, they turned right onto a relatively isolated street with few houses. It is unclear whether Adrienne felt threatened or uneasy at this point, and this may remain uncertain. After reviewing the evidence, investigators determined that the man seen on camera at the club and the man near Adrienne's abandoned car were two different individuals. Based on the circumstances surrounding her death, they believed the man from the club's CCTV footage was the likely culprit. The other man may have been an innocent bystander. The police were exploring all possible scenarios to provide answers to Adrienne's parents as soon as possible. Adrienne's family traveled to Florida to collect her belongings. Investigators met with her parents, Mark and Dolores, and assured them that they would do everything possible to find and bring the perpetrator to justice. According to her parents, Adrienne was a friendly person with no known enemies. She had a good relationship with her boyfriend, Justin, and her roommate, Jay. Investigators suspected that Adrienne did not know her killer. The laboratory report soon arrived, revealing that male DNA was found on the sheet, Adrienne's body, and the walls. Although the killer had attempted to destroy evidence by cutting out part of the sheet, forensic experts were still able to recover the DNA. However, when the investigators compared the DNA to the database, they were disappointed to find no matches. As a result, the police had the DNA of an unknown suspect in CCTV footage from the club where Adrienne spent her last evening. Detectives focused on the footage as the key to solving the case. They re-examined the recordings, this time reviewing both daytime and nighttime footage, which led to a breakthrough. Approximately 8 hours before Adrienne's death, investigators spotted the same man who had been talking to Adrienne in the parking lot and had left with her. This time, they got a clearer view of his face. To determine how the unknown man arrived at the club, investigators reviewed the footage and saw that he had taken a taxi. The taxi's phone number was visible on the recording, making it easy to identify the taxi company. This new information made it simpler to identify the man. Detectives discovered at the phone number that ordered the taxi was caught on footage near Diamond Dolls, and it belonged to Thomas Frederick. By comparing his driver's license photo with the image of the man on the CCTV footage, detectives confirmed that it was the same person. As a result, Thomas Frederick became the primary suspect in the case. The police required concrete evidence to arrest Frederick, but the surveillance footage alone was insufficient. To gather more evidence without alerting him, they began secretly monitoring his activities. Their goal was to obtain his DNA sample discreetly, as they were concerned that approaching him directly might scare him off. For a week and a half, the officers tracked Frederick's movements, following him to work and keeping a watchful eye on his home at night. Their patience eventually paid off when Frederick discarded a cigarette butt on the road. The officers collected the butt and sent it to a laboratory for DNA analysis. The purpose of the test was to determine if Frederick's DNA matched the samples found at the residence of Adrienne Robert. While waiting for the test results, the police continued to secretly monitor Frederick, as they suspected he might attempt to leave the state at any moment. After receiving the laboratory report, everyone's anticipation was met with an unsurprising conclusion. The DNA analysis revealed that the samples found on the sheet, walls, and Adrienne's body all belonged to Thomas Frederick. As a result, the police arrested and brought him in for questioning. During the interrogation, Frederick claimed to be a frequent visitor to various clubs and bars, where he would often meet new people. When shown a picture of Adrienne, he stated that they had met at Diamond Dolls, where she had bought him a drink and they had danced and talked. However, when the police confronted him with CCTV footage that contradicted his alibi, he changed his story. Frederick then claimed that he and Adrienne had walked together to the end of the street before parting ways. When asked if he had ever visited Adrienne's house, Frederick responded that he couldn't remember due to his intoxication. This inconsistency cast doubt on his entire account, leaving it unclear what he was trying to conceal. The man initially claimed he had no recollection of being at Adrienne's house. However, it was revealed that a witness had seen Adrienne running barefoot while the man chased after her, which suggested that he was lying. When questioned by the investigators, Frederick provided an explanation. He claimed that Adrienne asked him to escort her home and that she began running suddenly after deciding she was in a hurry. She took off her shoes, prompting him to chase after her in order to stay by her side. Despite Frederick's shifting story, detectives uncovered compelling evidence. A DNA test showed that Frederick's DNA was on Adrienne's sheet and numerous items throughout her home. Frederick altered his story after receiving the DNA test results, now he's claiming self-defense when confronted about his inconsistent explanations. Suddenly remembering past events he couldn't previously recall, Frederick finally shared an apparently factual narrative about how things actually occurred. They spent an intimate time in Adrienne's home where things ultimately became grim and both engaged. A confrontation between Adrienne and Thomas Frederick turned violent and resulted in a physical fight. During the altercation, Adrienne pulled out a knife and threatened Frederick, who then defended himself. Unfortunately, Adrienne was fatally injured in the process. After the incident, Frederick panicked and fled the scene instead of calling for emergency assistance. He feared being blamed for Adrienne's death. As a result, Frederick was charged with first-degree deprivation of life and appeared in court in January 2014. During the trial, the prosecutor presented a different account of the events. According to the prosecution, Adrienne and her friend Jay had been drinking at home before heading to Diamond Dolls, where they met Frederick. The three of them socialized and chatted casually. However, the next day, Adrienne decided to leave the club early to move into her new home with her partner, Justin. Frederick allegedly took advantage of the situation and followed her, despite her attempts to evade him. He chased her to her home, broke in, and attacked her with a knife from the kitchen. The prosecutor stated that the injuries on Adrienne's body suggested that she was forced to have intercourse with Frederick. Fearing she would report him to the police, Frederick decided to kill her. In an attempt to cover his tracks, he cut out a portion of the sheet where his semen had stained, but this effort was unsuccessful. The police were still able to find his DNA on multiple surfaces, including Adrienne's body. Frederick then took Adrienne's car keys, drove a short distance, and abandoned the vehicle. During the medical examiner's testimony, Adrienne's parents, Mark and Dolores Robert, left the courtroom, unable to bear the details of their daughter's final moments. Mark Robert later explained, "I didn't want to hear that. It won't bring Adrienne back, and I didn't want to know what she endured." It was clear that Adrienne had put up a fierce struggle. Her parents have since struggled to cope with life without their daughter. The grieving family member acknowledged that the healing process would be a long and difficult one. "We're still reeling from the loss of our loved one, and it will take time to recover," Dolores said. "However, we will eventually rebuild our lives, as that's what Adrienne would have wanted. It won't be easy, but we will get through this." During the trial, the defense team attempted to tarnish Adrienne's reputation by claiming that she had invited Thomas Frederick to her home for consensual sex. However, this assertion is baseless and may have been a desperate attempt by the perpetrator to justify his presence at the victim's house. The evidence, however, tells a different story. The presence of DNA points to one person, Thomas Frederick. The defense also claimed that Frederick acted in self-defense. She did sustain a stab wound as he was fighting her. Thomas Frederick was found guilty of first-degree murder and car theft. His claim of self-defense was rejected due to insufficient evidence. Although he was accused of killing Adrienne, there was no evidence to suggest he forced her into a sexual act by threatening her with a knife. Thomas Frederick, 25, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Adrienne's father expressed relief and satisfaction with the verdict, stating that while it wouldn't bring his daughter back, justice had been served. He found it difficult to remain calm in the presence of the man who murdered his daughter, especially since Frederick showed no remorse or sympathy, even after the verdict was read. Adrienne's parents, Mark and Dolores Robert, were overcome with emotion in the courtroom, but felt a sense of relief and happiness when the verdict was announced. They remembered their daughter, a always happy and lively person whose smile could light up a room, and expressed sadness that they would never see her again. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ana Rosa Barrera. Ana Rosa Barrera, a 40-year-old woman. She lived in a commune in the Santa Maria department, near Córdoba City, in the province of Córdoba, Argentina. People close to her described Ana Rosa as a courageous and adventurous person who was not afraid to start over and move forward with determination. Reports indicate that Ana Rosa lived in a tent for 4 years, although the reasons for this are unclear. She worked at the Secretariat for Children, Adolescents, and Families in Córdoba, a job she truly enjoyed. Additionally, she and her partner, Marcelo Favio Ferretto, ran an upholstery workshop together. They met when Ana Rosa started working for Marcelo's business. By 2017, Ana Rosa and Marcelo had been in a 10-year relationship. They shared a common interest in Reiki, a practice that involves using the palms to promote physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. Despite this common point, they still have problems in the relationship. Ana Rosa and Marcelo each have 4 children from previous relationships. As for Ana Rosa's family, her parents, brothers, and sisters reside in Córdoba. About Marcelo, he was a wallpaper maker with a workshop near their home. People close to they described Marcelo as a jealous and controlling person, which annoyed Ana Rosa. On Sunday, May 28, they visited relatives in Villa Lende, but the trip was marred by a heated argument sparked by Marcelo checking Ana Rosa's phone. The argument continued at their home, with neighbors hearing them shout and insult each other until the early hours of Monday morning. Later that day, Marcelo reported Ana Rosa missing to the police, although the exact timing of the report is disputed in media accounts. Most reports agree that Marcelo filed the report at the 18th police station on Tuesday, May 30th. According to Marcelo, claimed to have woken up at 6 a.m. on Monday to find Ana Rosa already gone, which he thought was unusual since she typically got up early to feed their dogs before leaving the house. He repeated this account to both the police and the media. Marcelo said he last saw Ana Rosa on Sunday night and then Monday night before going to bed. According to some sources, Marcelo realized something was wrong when Ana Rosa's colleagues called him, wondering about her absence. They knew she would never miss work without a good reason. Marcelo recounted the events leading up to her disappearance, saying that on Monday, he came across Ana Rosa's white Chevrolet while running an errand at the local pharmacy. Not long after, police discovered an abandoned car on Rainier Avenue outside a beauty salon in the Santa Isabel neighborhood. The location is about halfway between their home and Ana Rosa's workplace. Inside the car were her belongings and keys, but her cell phone was nowhere to be found. According to Marcelo, he tried to contact her, their friends, and their children also left messages, but no one received a response. The last message Ana Rosa sent via WhatsApp was at 10:40 p.m. Sunday, May 28. Ana Rosa's relatives all said that the circumstances surrounding Ana Rosa's disappearance are unclear. Marcelo has maintained regular contact with police since filing the report and has also attempted to locate Ana Rosa through social media and news outlets. In an interview with reporters, Marcelo shared Ana Rosa's plans on the day she went missing, which included an early morning swim at a gym and a scheduled appointment with a doctor. Marcelo emphasized that his primary concern is Ana Rosa's safe return home. Prosecutor Legendro Peralta Tanilo of Alta Gracia assumed control of the case, and the investigation commenced. Multiple theories were initially proposed, including the possibility of Ana Rosa being a victim of kidnapping, robbery, or revenge. The option of her leaving voluntarily was also considered. As part of the investigation, Marcelo testified for over 14 hours on Wednesday, May 31. However, his statements became increasingly inconsistent, raising suspicions among investigators. Marcelo's claims raised suspicions among detectives due to inconsistencies and shifting demeanor. Initially, he was confident and gave frequent interviews, but later emphasized his innocence, providing unsolicited details and justifying himself by discussing his relationship with Ana Rosa. As time passed, Ana Rosa's loved ones became increasingly desperate due to the lack of progress in the search. Meanwhile, the investigative authorities persisted in their efforts to solve the case. The prosecutor leading the investigation was convinced that Marcelo was withholding information and urged the investigators to scrutinize him more thoroughly. On Friday, June 2, during another meeting with police officers, Marcelo's demeanor shifted. He became more composed. However, when detectives showed him data from cell phone towers that contradicted his alibi, Marcelo became dismayed and ultimately revealed the truth. He admitted to killing Ana Rosa, running her over, and then dismembering her body to get rid of the evidence. After confessing to the brutal crime, Marcelo revealed the location of the dismembered body of Ana Rosa. Following the Marcelo confession, the police, aided by a canine unit, found Ana Rosa's remains at approximately 2:30 p.m. in a hole dug by Marcelo on a dirt road in the countryside, near a factory. The location was familiar to Marcelo, as he frequently visited the area for work-related purposes. It became clear that Marcelo's previous statements were false, except for his mention of a quarrel that occurred early Monday morning. According to the reconstructed events, Marcelo and Ana Rosa had been arguing the entire weekend before she went missing. Marcelo's intense jealousy sparked the violence. In the heat of an argument, Marcelo used a sledgehammer to hit Ana Rosa multiple times until she died. He then tried to put her body in the car but failed. Instead, he used a knife to dismember her body. He placed Ana Rosa's remains in the car and began moving to her burial site. After pleading guilty, authorities conducted a search of the defendant and Ana Rosa's home on Friday, where they discovered various tools, including machetes and knives of various sizes. Marcelo was then arrested and facing charges of capital murder, a crime that could carry a sentence of life in prison. Prosecutor Peralta Atima explained that the defendant's statement, in which he took responsibility for the crime, was not considered a formal confession. Instead, the record shows that he admitted to the crime during an interview as a witness. A formal statement will be made in the coming days, once sufficient evidence is gathered to support the charges. This evidence will include the final autopsy report, forensic analysis of vehicles and items found during searches, and the results of luminal tests. Marcelo's lawyer, Jose Luis Saca, stated that the police statement had no legal weight and could not as evidence. Furthermore, the defense announced that the defendant would not testify. Over the weekend, investigations continued, and on June 5, the preliminary autopsy report was released. The report concluded that Ana Rosa's cause of death was severe head trauma. On June 9, it was discovered that luminol tests had been conducted at the home where Ana Rosa and Marcelo lived. The tests showed a large amount of blood had been cleaned up. The medical examiners also discovered new details during the autopsy, including knife cuts on the victim's extremities. A cut, 18 centimeters long and 7 centimeters deep, was found on the victim's neck, reaching the cervical region. Based on these findings, the prosecutor's office charged Marcelo with double aggravated murder. Almost 2 years after Ana Rosa's murder, Marcelo's trial began. The prosecution explained the seriousness of the charges to the jury. According to the autopsy results, Ana Rosa suffered a severe initial blow to the face, which left her unconscious, followed by multiple blows to the head that crushed her skull. At the first hearing, Marcelo decided to stay silent. The court then heard testimony from witnesses. Deborah Territorios, Ana Rosa's daughter, testified that after her mother met Marcelo, she became increasingly distant from her children and other family members. Deborah stated that she and her father moved to a different city, followed by her older siblings, which made it harder for them to communicate with their mother. However, when Deborah spent time alone with her mother, Ana Rosa was loving and caring. But whenever Marcelo was around, her mother would pull away. Deborah even had to leave her mother's house quickly on occasion because Marcelo was expected to arrive soon. Ana Rosa's cousin, Roberto Enrique Reina, also testified. He witnessed their argument on May 28, 2017, which started at his house. According to Roberto, the argument began when Marcelo saw a message on Ana Rosa's phone. The prosecutor's indictment highlights Marcelo's control over Ana Rosa, including a power imbalance in their relationship and objectifying her in front of others. Fernando, a co-worker and friend of the victim, Ana Rosa, explained that after she started dating Marcelo, she initially grew distant from everyone, but then she tried to reconnect. System. Fernando added that Marcelo seemed to imitate Ana Rosa's actions, even taking Reiki classes shortly after learning she was also taking. According to the indictment, Ana Rosa told a friend that after starting energy harmonization therapy, she felt better and was able to improve her relationships with family members. She also planned to visit her son in Bolivia. However, as Ana Rosa's life improved, Marcelo became increasingly aggressive. Fernando reported that Marcelo once lashed out when Ana Rosa said women with positive attitudes could achieve their goals, he calling women idiots who would end up dying in a ditch. On the second day of the hearing, Claudio Bustamante, the police officer who took Marcelo's statement, testified. He told the jury that Marcelo had spontaneously confessed during the interrogation without any pressure from him. According to Bustamante, Marcelo stated that Ana Rosa had told him on Monday that she was no longer satisfied with him and was cheating on him, which made Marcelo angry and prompted him to hit her, although he couldn't remember what he used to hit her. On April 11th, the 11th Criminal Court's jury delivered its verdict, finding Marcelo Favio fared guilty of the murder of Ana Rosa Barrera. The sentence was life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 35 years, conditional on good behavior. Upon hearing the verdict, Ana Rosa's relatives burst into tears and shouted at Marcelo, labeling him as a murderer and wishing him to spend the rest of his life in prison. The prosecutor in charge of the case stated that the jury's decision aligned with the prosecution's request. The evidence showed that Marcelo Favio Fair had acted with full awareness and premeditation in planning Ana Rosa's murder. According to the prosecution, Marcelo's attempt to appear mentally unstable at the time of the crime was a tactic to evade the maximum sentence. The case of Hannah Clark. Hannah Clark was born on September 8, 1988. By 2020, she was a devoted mother of 3 young children, 2 sweet girls, Aaliyah and Liana, and a rambunctious boy named Trey. Hannah's loved ones remember her as a kind and gentle soul with a bright smile that could light up anyone's heart. She was a selfless and caring mother who gave her all to her children. Hannah's family life was marked by her relationship with her ex-husband, Rowan Baxter, a rugby player for the New Zealand Warriors team. Despite their significant age difference, they formed a strong bond, which deepened over time. Sue Clark, Hannah's mother, struggled to accept Rowan, but Hannah refused to listen to her concerns. People close to Rowan shared negative opinions about him. Sue, Hannah's mother, had a nagging feeling that something was off about Rowan. She perceived him as arrogant and self-centered, which made her uneasy. She was also concerned about the significant age gap between Rowan and Hannah. When they first met, Hannah was a recent graduate, while Rowan was 31 years old. Additionally, Rowan's past relationships were a worry for Sue, particularly since he was still in the process of divorcing his previous wife and was living with her at the time. When Hannah introduced Rowan to her parents, they questioned him about his ex-wife. Rowan explained that he was staying with her due to their son. Eventually, Rowan finalized his divorce and continued his relationship with Hannah. In 2011, he proposed to her, and she accepted. They got married in Kingsley, New South Wales, Australia. The following year, they had 3 children together. Hannah and her family, including her father Rowan, were passionate about sports. However, Rowan's muscular physique, developed during his professional athlete days, was partly due to steroid use, which led to mental health issues. As a personal trainer, Hannah's approach differed from her father's. She was loved by her clients for her kindness, empathy, and dedication, earning her a loyal following. Rowan's approach to training was unique, but his behavior was marred by aggression and inappropriateness, likely caused by steroid use. This made him a poor trainer, as clients don't need someone who makes them feel uncomfortable. Rowan struggled to communicate effectively with people, which negatively impacted his career and finances. As a result, his wife Hannah had to become the primary breadwinner, which further irritated Rowan. He felt emasculated by her success, as she was doing a better job than he was. Despite their financial struggles, they decided to open their own fitness club. However, this decision was largely driven by Rowan's desire to control Hannah's every move and monitor her whereabouts. Rowan's behavior in the store mirrored his past actions at the gyms where he worked. He often felt the need to assert superiority over women. During a private training session with Sue's mother, he showed his cruel side, acting inappropriately instead of showing respect. He dropped Sue, causing her to hit her head and bleed, and laughed at her clumsiness, showing no sympathy. Despite this alarming behavior, Hannah's parents tried to accept him for their daughter's sake. Rowan's control over Hannah was all-encompassing, and he isolated her from her family and friends. He dictated who she could see and when, and even forbade the children from visiting their grandmother and Hannah from communicating with her brother, whom he disliked. As a result, Hannah felt trapped and enslaved, confined to the walls of her own home. Rowan's behavior towards Hannah was also emotionally and physically abusive. He would demand intimacy from her, and if she refused, he would become enraged, taking out his anger on her and the children. After forcing himself on her, he would then apologize insincerely, attributing his behavior to a burst of passion. Hannah's life was slowly under the constant control and cruelty of her husband, Rowan. Their marriage, once filled with love and passion, had degenerated into a nightmare of fear and submission. Rowan's tyrannical behavior had created a toxic environment where Hannah lived in constant terror of his wrath. Rowan's cruelty was not limited to Hannah, he also targeted their children. While some playful exchanges between parents and children are normal, Rowan frequently crossed the line, intentionally hurting and belittling them. When the children cried, he would mock them, showing no empathy or respect for their feelings. For example, a conflict between Rowan and his daughter Aaliyah turned disastrous when Rowan used excessive force, causing Aaliyah to hit her head. The injury was severe enough to require hospitalization and stitches. Instead of taking responsibility and apologizing, Rowan blamed Aaliyah for the incident. This was not an isolated incident, as Rowan had a history of tormenting his children. As an athlete, he would take ice baths after training, but he would also force his children, including his young son Trey, to sit in icy water, disregarding their tears and pleas for mercy. In the same year, Hannah's life took a drastic turn for the worse. Rowan, who had recently become interested in jiu-jitsu, returned home from a training session one day, still pumped up with adrenaline. Without warning, he physically attacked Hannah, grabbing her throat with a tight grip and uttering terrifying words. Consumed by fear, Hannah didn't immediately recognize that she was experiencing domestic violence. However, this incident was far more frightening than anything she had previously endured. As a result, Hannah made up her mind to leave Rowan at the earliest chance. After reaching out to the police, she provided a detailed account of the horrific experience to the officer. The police officer informed Hannah that forcing an intimate relationship without consent is a form of domestic violence. This conversation was a turning point for Hannah, helping her understand the situation and prompting her to take immediate action. She quickly gathered her children and left for her parents' house, trying to escape the abusive situation. Although their divorce was not yet finalized in November 2019, Hannah made the decision to allow Rowan to spend time with their children. However, she was aware that she had no legal authority to control this arrangement without a court's intervention. Even so, Hannah was still uneasy about leaving the children in Rowan's care. To fix his problem, Rowan was struggling to cope with his emotions and sought help from his church's pastor, Christopher. Christopher was a kind and supportive person who was always willing to listen. However, as Rowan began to open up to him, Christopher noticed some disturbing traits. Rowan had a desire for dominance and control, which he occasionally revealed when his confidence faltered. During one of these moments, Rowan confessed to Christopher that he was aware his actions were wrong and wanted to change, but didn't know how. Rowan's admission was a crucial step towards reform, and Christopher's guidance could have been instrumental in helping him. However, before progress could be made, a shocking event occurred. Hannah and her children were walking down the street when Rowan suddenly appeared out of nowhere, grabbed their daughter Lion, and disappeared. Hannah's life was turned upside down by unbearable anxiety and fear for her daughter Lion's safety. For 2 agonizing days, she had no idea where Lion was, and her distress grew by the minute. Hannah turned to the police, who launched a search and eventually found Lion safe and sound with her father. Although Lion was unharmed, the traumatic experience left a lasting impact on Hannah. The police, recognizing the danger that Hannah and her children faced, urged her to file a police report against her ex and obtain a protection order. However, despite the problems her ex, Rowan, had caused, he still had joint custody of the children, which he used to continue manipulating and abusing Hannah. After a meeting with Rowan, the children were returned to Hannah's parents. However, before leaving, Rowan attempted to humiliate Hannah by displaying pictures of her in her underwear on his car, in plain sight of their children. Hannah, enraged, tried to remove the photos, but Rowan responded violently. He grabbed her shoulder, twisted her arm, and punched her in the face, splitting her lip. The attack was only stopped when Hannah's mother, Sue, intervened. As Rowan drove away, he yelled insults. Hannah, traumatized, immediately reported the incident to the police, as it was a clear violation of the protection order. Unfortunately, the authorities were unable to respond in time, which ultimately led to a tragic outcome. It was a typical morning on February 19, 2020. Hannah grabbed her car keys and left her parents' house to drop off her 3 kids at kindergarten. Hannah and her children got into the car, but before they could leave, Rowan jumped in, causing Hannah to become frightened for their safety. She tried to calm Rowan down, but he was furious and began yelling threats and ordering Hannah to start the car and drive away. Hannah carefully drove off, trying not to escalate the situation. As she turned onto Raven Street, the car stopped. In a desperate and vengeful act, Rowan grabbed a canister of gasoline from under the car seat and drenched Hannah and her children with it. Michael ZCK, who happened to be nearby, witnessed the horrific scene. He said that earlier that morning, he had heard a car pull up outside his house. Hannah, frantic and pleading for help, screamed that Rowan was trying to kill her and pouring gasoline all over them. As Hannah begged for mercy, Rowan refused to let her go, his face twisted in a rage. Michael rushed to the car and was met with Rowan's emotionless face, holding a lighter in his hand. In the next moment, the car erupted in flames. The explosion was followed by blood-curdling screams, a deafening ringing, and then an eerie silence. Luckily, Hannah had narrowly escaped the inferno, but was left with severe burns and bleeding. Frantically, she pleaded for assistance, not for her own suffering, but for her children who remained trapped in the blazing car. A car happened to drive by, and a doctor who was not on duty stopped to offer assistance. Seeing Hannah's distress, the doctor rushed to her side. Meanwhile, Michael intervened quickly, grabbing a hose from his house to try and extinguish the flames. However, the fire was too intense, and it engulfed the entire car, leaving no hope of rescuing the children. The doctor and Michael yelled at Hannah to take cover and get away from the fire, but she was too consumed by grief to hear them. With growing desperation, Michael rushed to the car to rescue the children, but the intense flames and scorching heat thwarted his efforts. Hannah lay on the road, her body badly burned, repeatedly begging for someone to save her children. At that moment, no one grasped the full extent of the tragedy. Hannah's body was severely burned, with over 97% of her skin damaged, except for her feet. Despite her excruciating pain, Hannah's thoughts were consumed by her children, who were now left vulnerable and unprotected. Hannah's badly burned body left police doubting her survival chances. Yet, she refused to give up. With fierce determination, she provided a crucial testimony. Police officer Angus Cook carefully recorded every word Hannah spoke as she struggled to recount the events leading up to her tragic situation. With great difficulty, Hannah managed to name her ex-husband, Rowan Baxter, as the person responsible for her ordeal, and provided a detailed account of what had happened. As Hannah's voice grew weaker and her body frail, Officer Angus remained by her side, offering words of encouragement and praise for her bravery. He reassured her that she had already done enough and that everything would be okay. Hannah was on the brink of death, yet she didn't fully grasp the horror unfolding around her. When questioned about whether Rowan had threatened her earlier, she replied that he hadn't. As doctors approached to alleviate her suffering, she lost the ability to speak. Meanwhile, Rowan Baxter's behavior was erratic. Despite suffering severe burns covering 80% of his body, he managed to exit the car unassisted. Rowan sat on the road, staring at the burning vehicle. After a brief moment, he inexplicably climbed back into the car, which was engulfed in flames. A witness, putting their own life at risk, attempted to extinguish the fire at the back of the car. It was then that Rowan retrieved a knife from the vehicle and began to chase people away, preventing them from putting out the flames. The children, trapped in the burning car, had little chance of survival. Nevertheless, bystanders refused to give up their efforts to save them. Rowan refused to let anyone approach the car, claimed them to a horrific death. In a final, selfish act, he stabbed himself with the knife. Despite her own life-threatening injuries, her primary concern was for the health of her children and her desire to reveal the truth. Tragically, Hannah passed away in the hospital on the same day, at the young age of 31. Hannah was a victim of severe domestic violence, which also affected her children. She fought tirelessly to protect her family from their abuser, but sadly, her efforts were ultimately unsuccessful. Throughout her daily struggles, Hannah showed immense courage, standing up for her loved ones despite the numerous challenges she faced. For days later, a massive gathering took place to pay tribute to Hannah and her children. A lasting memorial, Hannah's House, was also created in Camp Hill, where a tree planting ceremony was held in her honor, accompanied by a plaque that tells the story of her life.